Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. My name is Derek Melenda, and I am very tired. But so while we're here, we're gonna hang out. Ooh, boy, I gotta tell you, this end of summer, it's been a very hectic and busy summer. And I, for one, I need a vacation before I go on my vacation. Before I come back, probably to just need another vacation. Everybody in the chat was talking about coffee, and I was like, "Oh my god, I've got my Monster Energy." So hopefully we are going to be good to go. But and I got an early flight tomorrow. I got to get up at maybe 5:45 or something. Ooh, gonna try to get some sleep on the plane, but hopefully get some sleep tonight. Actually, we'll probably go for maybe a shorter period of time today, and then I might get to bed early. But yeah, so pretty casual vibe. We've been kind of grinding the last couple of weeks, getting through a variety of stream goals, and they have been, much more what I will say engaged streams. Going through all the mechanics and stuff like that of something like DC-20 or Starfinder 2nd Edition. It's very taxing. And of course, I always get comments of people yelling at me because I missed something or, I didn't cover something adequately. And it's like, I talked about the game for 4 hours. So it's not even like I gave it a quick little once over. But these games are huge. They're huge. They're massive. It's impossible to get through everything, especially if you go into them at the level and the depth that I go into them at. Luke says I should do another wacky Vegas live stream. Well, Luke, I don't know if it would be quite as wacky as it was last time, because this time I would make sure that when I set up the live stream, the title wouldn't just be live from Las Vegas. I would use words like RPG and Pathfinder 2nd Edition to make sure that nobody ever clicked on it. London wants to know what's left on the backlog. A couple of things. Number one, Candela Obscura, although I think the bloom is definitely off the rose there. I don't hear anybody talking about Candela Obscura anymore. But yeah, we're supposed to do a Call of Cthulhu game. We're supposed to do it last holiday season, so we'll try to do it this holiday season. We did have somebody who supported it for an Alchemist class stream. We have technically, I think we have one more core class stream left, which might be the Ranger. And that might be about it. And of course, there's generally speaking been a lot of interest of people. What do we think of Pathfinder 2nd Edition with the remaster now that it's kind of fully out there? Tigas, long-time listener, first-time caller. Well, welcome to the stream. Well, I guess not to the stream, but to the chat. Hard to catch the streams on EU time. I know. And, it's one thing that I definitely want to do better is try to at least once a month try to figure out a schedule where I can hop on around noon or so, which makes it much easier for the EU folks. Recently joined the Patreon because your work is so good. Thank you for what you do. Well, thank you, Tigas. Well, thank you for joining the Patreon. Thank you for being a part of the community. Hopefully you get as much out of it as you are able to put into it. We always benefit from having so much experience and knowledge and different opinions going around, and that's always very, very good. Let's see here. To Jackal, what is up? Mark says, I still need better thumbnails and titles. This today was, look, you're basically saying don't put your ugly mug on the thumbnail. It's not going to attract anybody. I know. I need to dye the hair orange. Go with the Ginny D approach. What's up, Thaddeus? What's up, Trey? Bob is here. Hello, Bob. I am rocking my autumn colors today. Pathfinder PhD, how is the doggo? Doggo's doing great, although the other doggo is suffering very badly from seasonal allergies. So she is currently on a sort of an antihistamine, and we have her in in e-collar to keep her from biting at her paws because they get so red and inflamed, unfortunately. KC made it. Good to see you, KC. NR is running soon. Yeah, so a little delayed, and I think we'll do a video for it. We really want to focus on making sure that we get all of our patrons who have been so patient with us over this year, make sure they're uploaded, onboarded, that if they want to be getting games, they can get games. But we'll probably do a short video to try to build some hype, as Bob is saying, is prone to say, about our sort of pseudo NR that we're running this year, and that's Southern Beaches. Normally, of course, Northern Reaches runs the majority of the year, but this year we're kind of taking an abbreviated season with some slightly different parameters. But I think a lot of people are really excited to play Pathfinder 2 again as a big community, and hopefully we can end up with like 30, 40, 50 people, playing a bunch of games. By the end, sometimes there've been plenty of the first two seasons. I think there've been times where we had 80 or 100 people, but usually you have a core group of about 50 to 60 active players, and by the end of the season, that can dwindle down. And one of the things that we're hoping that this season does is leveling is not tied to how much you play. That's kind of something that I have myself kind of come around on a little bit. When the first Northern Reaches came out, I was very much like, people should earn it. You should get the experience points, and if you play more and you get more experience points, you deserve to be higher level, which is great in theory. But the problem is with a lot of these D20 games, it actually kind of hurts you, because as your play base, because these games are so balanced around level, as your player base continues to play, you're going to have some people who play at a faster rate, some people who play at a slower rate, and you're going to start to get this widening of the distribution of what level people are. Sure, for the first month, everybody's level, 1, 2, 3. They're all within a few levels of each other, and it works. But by the time you get to like month 3, you might have folks who are pushing through till 10th level, 12th level, and you have other people who are back at 4th level, and now the math starts to break down. And we tried to address some of that in season 2 of Northern Reaches, but still, it was never a foolproof solution. And so for this season, the Southern Beaches, because everybody's on vacation, they're heading down to the Southern Hemisphere to a beautiful tropical resort to regain their lost strength after years of adventuring. Everyone just levels up once a week. So there's still little fun bonuses for gaining experience and for playing a bunch and for taking on more challenging encounters. But the leveling is tied to just what week is it, and that doesn't matter whether you're playing or how or when you join the campaign. So if you play in week 2 or 3 and everybody's level 4, you'll be level 4, and then things get busy and you miss a month. Well, when you come back, everybody will be level 7 or 8. You just level up your character to level 7 or 8, and you can keep playing with the other folks. And that's kind of what we're really going for here. A couple super chats coming in. I don't have any stream goals tonight, but if you want to throw some love my way, that'd be great. Of course, I'm on my way to Las Vegas tomorrow, so anything and always is appreciated. Meba Man, going to play board games with the nephews. I will have to watch. We'll catch VOD later. Make it a good one. Meba Man, thank you so much. I'm sure you probably left. I'd love to know what board games you're going to play. Although you say with nephews, but maybe they're older nephews. Maybe you're playing something really good. I will say that one of the things that I did discover this summer is I have been missing board games, proper board games. And while I love TTRPGs, I think that something has really been missing in my life from like the board game and certainly the miniature wargaming department. There was a time in my life when I was playing almost as many board games as TTRPGs, maybe even more, and certainly a ton of like Warhammer and Warhammer 40K. And I think that was a good balance to my sort of gaming persona, because one of the things that I've really struggled with over this summer is sort of understanding what role do TTRPGs and the system play in my enjoyment of a game itself. And, specifically what I mean is like, I think there's a temptation, especially with people like me who are very, play a lot of games, to try to make TTRPGs into a be-all, end-all. And I see this a lot of times with other people who don't realize it, where they have a natural desire to, beat an opponent. Combat is sport. They want that sort of tactical, robust, tactical balance challenge. Great. I just don't know that RPGs are really the best way to do it. I know there's a lot of systems coming out, and I know people talk about all these balancing systems, but time and time again, and this summer proved it to me through playing Forbidden Lands, through playing games at Origins and Gen Con. The things that make TTRPGs truly. Now, I'm not saying you can't have a good tactical combat in your RPG session. I'm not even saying that you're not enjoying it. You are. I mean, if you're having fun, moving your minis around and playing your tactical combat game, I think that's great. I'm just saying that to me isn't the unique value add of a TTRPG. And when it comes to a truly tactical combat as sport game, I want to play a game with very robust rules where everybody sort of agrees ahead of time that this is how we're going to play, and then win or lose, that's how things happen. When you're playing a TTRPG, I want it to be collaborative, right? I mean, that's why I'm playing with other people. It's why I'm playing with a GM and not a computer. I want crazy interpretations and, just all sorts of random events to sort of spiral out of control. That's why I signed up for the TTRPG. That's why I signed up or wanted to play that. Same thing. Now, look, I love minis. I love minis. We have so many minis, and look, nothing looks better than a great battle mat or a Dwarven Forge setup, or even just like a nice, good, well drawn map with Sharpies or on like gaming paper, or dry erase on a chess or wet erase on a Chessex mat, and some great looking minis, maybe some scatter terrain. Looks great. But again, that's not maybe where TTRPGs are the strongest. Certainly that's where, when I was playing a lot of Warhammer, I didn't have as much of that urge to get all those minis out and to get all that stuff out into my TTRPG. And so I think that, it's sort of like having a balanced diet is good for you. I think trying to get all of my nutrition from TTRPGs has been sort of to my detriment, I will say. John says, you heard it here, folks. Battlecry 3 is going to have PF2E without levels mod. Without levels mod. John, I don't know. Now you're breaking my brain. I mean, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that we were going to vote for tonight was like, do RPGs need to have skills? Do they need to have progression? And the answer is, I don't know. I think we innately are sort of associate that. It's not about progression as it is about. I mean, obviously for a lot of people, it is about progression. It's about getting better, being able to do more. But I think the most important thing, more important than progression to me, is change. And I think that one of the things that I think older versions of D&D, and I've discussed this before, is that, because John's talking about, without levels. I know you're being kind of, stirring the shit there a little bit, stirring the pot there a little bit, John. But I think one of the things that has occurred to me again, and I've talked about this on the stream, is older versions of D&D had this idea of level-based progression, right? You gain more hit points, your saving throws get better, right? Your character is clearly getting stronger, numbers. Granted, they're not quite as burr as they are nowadays, but numbers go burr. I mean, a first level fighter in AD&D first edition might have, 6 or 7 hit points. A 9th or 10th level fighter might have 50 or 60 hit points, right? So, you're clearly stronger. But I think the key thing there is your levels were progressing, but the game itself was fundamentally changing. And we've talked about this in the structure of basic D&D and BECME D&D and AD&D, where your characters naturally evolved from sort of this, sort of unimportant kind of dregs of society, scoundrels, dungeon crawlers, to suddenly you had, you were skilled veterans, able to sort of explore the land and conquer, unexplored territory. And then you became these kind of great heroes and eventually lords of the land, and maybe even to the point of, kind of dealing with planar politics. And while the progression of the game was just numbers go burr, the game changed a lot. And what I will say is, having played a bunch of the primary D20 based game that I have played over the last couple of years has been Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And one of the things that I've noticed again and again, when I was a player in Smith's campaign, Dark of Winter, I had two characters. I had started with a halfling cleric, and then by 10th or 11th level, I couldn't take it anymore. It was way too boring. And so I got to make a fighter. It's kind of a joke because I was like, let's see how good these gnome flick maces really are. And spoiler alert, before all the nerfs and stuff, they were very good. But and sometimes I would play two characters because we just didn't have enough people. But anyways, but fundamentally, the game really wasn't that different at level 15 as it was at level 5. I might be fighting cooler looking monsters. They might be taking up more squares on the battlefield. They might be taking up 3 by 3 instead of 1 by 1. But I was still double striking. And, my cleric was still casting heal. Sure, it was a 7th level heal or an 8th level heal, but I was still just casting heal. So fundamentally, the game didn't really feel like it changed that much. And I think that's why I think people get bored. I think maybe more so than anything, I think the reason that these shorter campaigns have become sort of the popular game method of gaming is because, rightfully so, because people do get bored. They get bored with more of the same. And the idea of slogging all the way through to 20th level without very much changing, I think is very unappealing to a lot of people. John, with another super chat. In the car/racing community, people like me shit on drag racing because we'd rather be a fast driver than just have a fast car. Maybe a similar dichotomy exists in tactical TTRPGs. Better character versus a better player. All right, so let's break this down. So John, who is into racing and building cars, shit on drag racing. Drag racing, it's like the 5-second race where you're not really driving the car because it just goes in a straight line. And it's, I'm sure don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's a lot of skill that does go into it. But fundamentally, it is about having the fast car. So is the question of skill in the game versus skill as a character, as a player. Okay. Well, let me actually say this. Okay, and this is actually where my truest heart lies and why I struggle sometimes with a lot of RPGs. And one of the reasons why I'm really attracted to games like PBTA, Forge in the Dark, is Ray Winninger, when he wrote his Dungeon Craft articles in the late 90s, early 2000s, and I've said it before on this channel, the third rule of Dungeon Craft, maybe it's the second rule, could be the third rule. Third rule of Dungeon Craft is great adventures challenge both the character and the player. And that, to me, fundamentally, is when, for me, RPGs are singing the most. So, and maybe it just seems to me like that people have discovered, maybe rightfully so, that is a very delicate balance to get right. And so there has been a trend, both in systems, but also in playgroups, to sort of lean to one side or the other. And so you end up with this kind of growing structural divide, okay? On one hand, and this seems like an odd grouping, right? But it is. On one hand, you have the super heavy involved role players, the real, storyline people. It's more about what my character says and describes than, what my dice roll was. Believe it or not, those people are in the same group, the same side of the equation as the OSR folks who are saying, we don't want these complicated characters. We don't want all these rules. We want the game to be about the player and the decisions that the player's making and the ideas that the ideas that the players are making and rulings over rules, right? It's crazy, but OSR and the heavy deep role players are in the same boat. And then on the other side, you have RPGs that, again, all RPGs profess to, care about the story and all this other stuff. But, when you watch if you didn't watch, but if you watch the D&D Direct thing today, they were talking about like, oh, we're so excited for our players because we're coming out with a whole new bunch of feats and a bunch of new subclasses and a bunch of new this, right? I mean, they're very clearly appealing to the character, to building a character, to having all the the widgets on your character, to having rules for everything. Like the great rallying cry against 5th edition is, oh my God, the DM has to think and has to make stuff up, and the rules don't get it 100% right 100% of the time, and that's frustrating. Come play another game like Pathfinder 2 or some of these new pseudo 5e games where they say, look, we fixed all the problems that you had with 5e. Now the game just works. Implying that being uninvolved with the success of your game is actually to your benefit. And so, that is a very different type of group. That is a type of community. That's a type of player group that is very interested in building a strong character and focusing on learning to use the rules to overcome challenges. And I feel like both of these groups, right? So you've got your OSR heavy role, OSR / heavy role players, and then you've got your super tactical miniature combat game 4E, PF2, whatever here. And I think that the solution is in the middle. I think that's when RPGs are at their greatest. I think that's when RPGs are at their best. As Ray Weniger said, again, with the third rule of Dungeon Craft, great adventures challenge both the character and the player. And so I think that is the essential dilemma that we're trying to reach or trying to resolve. Is how do we truly, and of course, it's hard. It's easy to say, but hard to do. And of course, the nature of the system that you're playing makes a huge difference as well. Sorry if I missed any chat here. Somebody was asking about, are the Indigo Isles? Bob was saying, are the Indigo Isles near the southern beaches? Yeah, they probably are pretty close, I would assume. London says, hot question. Can an RPG deliver equal or better resource management to a board game? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, Ben says yes as well, but at the cost of time. I also think the issue is, role-playing games have to work against that balance of, fiction first, right? And how do we deal with that dilemma when it comes to resource games? Full Metal Dragon says miniatures are awesome, and I completely agree. Reaper Bone 6. Oh my God. I still have probably, I don't even know how many, couple hundred Reaper Bones from 1, 2. I don't know if I did 3. I definitely did 1. I did way too many for 1. And I did a lot for 2 as well. But 3, I think I just got like a pretty modest amount. But I really do think they're all still in those white Reaper boxes in little plastic bags. Hasn't even opened their Bones 5 yet. Spoken like a true miniature painter. Let's see here. Yeah, I mean, Full Metal Dragon, I kind of agree with what you're saying. It's not about getting better, but character growth. Now, of course, and again, this sounds derogatory, but it's not. But the lazy way of saying my character is growing, right, is just saying I'm getting stronger. And the way I think about this is think about meeting some really boorish person in real life, and they just say like, well, what is success in your life? And they say, to have a higher income next year than I did this year. Okay. And then have a higher income the year after that. And, that's a pretty easy, simple metric. It's a very simple rubric to sort of judge, I guess, your life success about. But, can you really say that your life is better? Can you really say that you're growing? Sure. But I think that while I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with striving for that, I do think it's sort of the lowest common denominator in terms of that. So I do think that it's not about getting better. It's about character growth. I agree. Trey says, well, we added my brother-in-law to our PF2 group, and he's a big board gamer. So he's brought in some other games, and I think it's been able to scratch an itch that TTRPGs can't really get. And I agree. I think, I think for a lot of gamers, people who, I use the term when you're a TTRPG or you're a gamer, have this problem, which is that, I think innately as someone who games, for the most part, not everybody, but there's a lot of us who, have a little bit of a competitive streak, who want to try, to put their skills to the test. And sometimes that comes out in RPGs in a very toxic way. And the character who tries to outbuild everybody, right? And that kind of behavior is not rewarded. And in fact, we have a Magic the Gathering channel on our Patreon, and we talk about Commander, which I don't play. And part of the reason I don't play Commander is because Magic the Gathering is a competitive game, and yet you have these groups that get together, and there's this social dynamic of like, well, you should try to win, but not try to win because you're not trying to like ruin anybody else's fun. And it's kind of like, this is, I think this starts to sound like TTRPG stuff, right? Do your own thing, be a cool character, but respect and mind everybody else's fun. I say that stuff to you all the time, and I mean it. And while I'm not trying to say that like in a board game, I'm trying to make somebody's life miserable by being a dick, I'm not necessarily as concerned about them having fun. I'm, concerned about, playing the game to the best of my ability and seeing if I can win. And so I think that a lot of TTRPGers could benefit from having a more focused competitive source or outlet to some of their gaming urges. I'm liking the idea of very slow progression where you can still play with players of different levels, but where you buy skills or feats. And that is kind of sort of basically how Torchbearer works. It's kind of also how Legend of the Five Rings works to a certain extent as well. Yeah, exactly, John. I mean, I do think different games fill different niches. And I just think that there's a tendency for people to try to sort of squeeze everything into one. I will say, though, that, over the last year, as I've played more games of, like, at Gen Con, I finally got to pull a Bust Out Arcs, and which is the new game from Leader Games, from Cole Worley, same guy who made Root, the board game, and Oath. And this is such an interesting take on board games. It's really like, I don't know how to describe it. One of these days, maybe one of these days we'll have to do a stream about those games, just to kind of understand it, in Oath in particular. But they are board games that aren't necessarily the most. I mean, they're very compelling board games. Like, you could just play them as a board game, and I think it's compelling strategic decision making. But what happens when you play these board games is you kind of accidentally or inadvertently end up telling a story. A rather good story. And that is a really interesting dynamic. And it's something that I think that some of my favorite TTRPGs do as well. Where you're trying to play the game, and in trying to play the game, you end up creating story moments. You end up creating character arcs. And it's this really nice evolution of it. So I think that there's a lot of interesting things, and like, the closest, we've talked about this game on this stream before, but like one of the closest things, like Strike, that very small niche indie RPG, was sort of an example of this, where it took a very tactical combat game, right? With squares and pushes, and push 3 squares, pull 2 squares, slide 1 square, heals, AoEs, strikers, defenders, blasters. But it contextualized that fight as a means to an end. And the end was creating the next story outcome moment. I just feel like a lot of times when I get into a combat in a lot of TTRPGs, this is true even of my current campaign, which is Forbidden Lands. I feel like the outcome of that combat isn't really going to change anything. Like, it might kill somebody, I guess, or the party might, succeed and continue on their way. But I just don't feel like there's ever that many really, truly interesting consequences from those combats, other than, did we win? Did we lose? And how many resources did we spend to accomplish that? Are we even playing a game that, there is resources to lose and resources to spend? And I think that's part of the reason why I'm so uninterested in combat these days, is because I kind of get a sense that, look, I mean, I'm not trying to say the outcome doesn't matter, because, obviously a TPK is really a problem. So you obviously want to avoid that. But avoiding a TPK, while it feels like a victory, is kind of not the kind of victory we're talking about. We were talking about before about, these games should be about characters growing and characters changing. And that's what I really want to see. Seems like you're not taking the mouse guard motto to heart, right? It matters not what you fight, but what you fight for. Well, no, I mean, I think that's exactly kind of the point. Is I like the idea more and more with my RPGs. Like, again, if I wanted to sit down and, jam miniatures against one another and just roll dice and see who was smarter and better and luckier, I would be playing this more often, which is to say at all, because I haven't played this since it came out yet, even though I bought a lot of it. So, I think you could totally do this, right, in your TTRPG, and you can totally have fun doing it, and I think that's awesome. I'm just saying, I think that's kind of leaving a lot on the table. I think there's more that we can do with these games than we can maybe otherwise benefit from. Full Metal Dragon says Strike is very underrated, and Ben says, is it? Ben, I think it is fly. I think it does fly under the radar. I think it is a game that not a lot of people know. And I think that it came at it's kind of built off of an edition of D&D that people at the time hated. They still kind of hate it, although it kind of has a little bit of a renaissance. But, and then of course, I think the creator ended up stepping away. So it never got like that push, that as much as I think it could. Let's see here. John says, I do wonder how many of the people who really enjoy super nitty-gritty tactical combat aren't just people who would rather play a board game but can't find people to play with. So, John, let me actually, I think I can answer this. Yes, except one of the things that I think that people like about RPGs is the sense of long-term progression. Even if I don't necessarily mean years, although, that's what it used to mean. I mean the idea that like your investment in this character and watching their numbers go up is going to be something that, takes multiple sessions of play, and you're going to get the chance to see the character's quote unquote power grow. So you'll notice that a lot of games have come out in the last couple of years, Gloomhaven being the most, the last couple of years, like I said, came out like 7 years ago, but that, sort of take that idea, these legacy board games, right? Legacy board games is, the idea of sort of taking some of these campaign elements of RPGs and applying them into board games to great success. Pandemic Legacy, all those legacy games did very, very well. People really, really leaned into those. However, the other common problem, I think with a lot of people is like Gloomhaven's great. I think it's a fun game. I think for a lot of these people, it's not complicated enough, because the Gloomhaven game is built for, maybe the regular board gamer. These high-level TTRPG characters have an insane amount of mechanical complexity that, quite frankly, I don't think a board game could ever get away with. And the reason is because TTRPGs sort of have the ultimate safety valve in the form of the game master, because if you're writing an RPG, and ideally you're trying to, especially with these modern RPGs, you're trying to account for every variable, but that at the end of the day, there is somebody else that isn't you that sort of kind of takes the blame. Of course, that has changed now more than ever. And now, like, if a game goes badly, like, people will just blame the system. It's like, but you had a GM there. They definitely could have done something about your situation. They didn't have to be like, well, fuck, that's what the system says, and there's nothing I could do about it. And so, anyways, I think that these TTRPG people would be very happy if these board games were very complicated, 2, longer lasting, and 3, had really good developed, even if it was completely linear and on rails, stories with, sort of Mass Effect Baldur's Gate 3 story decisions that you can make. And it's like, choose your own adventure. So combine choose your own adventure games with dungeon crawlers, legacy type games like Gloomhaven, and just make the game more complicated. And I think those people would actually find those games to be highly enjoyable. Well, it's certainly the case too that I don't think it's easier to find a TTRPG. I mean, not around here. I mean, we have massive board game meetups where you get 20, 30, 40 people who show up and just play board games. So there's a lot of different tastes, though. TTRPG meetups tend to be pretty monoculture, right? D20, either 5e or Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Sometimes you might see somebody playing a Call of Cthulhu game, What up, Dr. Metropolis?
Dr. Metropolis tipped $3. Frostgrave is big at my LGS. We ran a simple narrative campaign and people dug it. Was pick up and play but had that progression feel from a TTRPG. There's so many options nowadays.
Yeah, I might be out with my miniatures, but I have a copy of Frostgrave around here somewhere. It's like an early edition, but very much like kind of like Mordheim, and we used to play Mordheim, which was again a skirmish squad based RPG, but it had campaign progression growth elements. It was actually a really your characters had experience points. They could acquire injuries. They could level up. They could get new tactics, new abilities, new equipment. And it was very popular with me and my friends for at least a couple years. And some of the stories that came out of those, my Skaven clan, Eshin Skaven against Smith's frequently unlucky Middenheimers, these sort of barbaric humans. There were some really classic storylines that happened from it. Like I had saved up for this whole campaign to buy a rat ogre, which is basically exactly what it sounds like. It's just a gigantic ogre mutant rat. Walks around on two legs and smashes things. And everybody was terrified of this thing because I was kind of winning the campaign. And Smith, basically, we had a run-in with him. And I took his favorite young blood, who was sort of a neophyte, and I destroyed him. And he gained a disability from it. He gained kind of stupidity from the head, a traumatic brain injury. And so I was messing all these characters up, and then Smith, basically we had a match, and he was his goal was just to take out my rat ogre, and then I don't exactly remember how it happened, but we ended up on this tower, and Smith was basically sacrificing his warband just to try to take my rat ogre out. Ended up hitting him, critting him. He got thrown off the tower. The rat ogre fell to his death. It was, and other people who weren't even playing were yeah, cheering. And that's a war game. There's no role-playing game element to it. You know what I mean? So you can have stories that emerge from just playing the game. But the good news there is that the game itself fundamentally is interesting. And, I think there's also something to be said about those moments because, this was a war game. There was no GM trying to make, how do we make sure that the characters have agency at all points in times? Nope. We want to make sure that the players are highly advantaged. After all, Smith's Middenheimers are clearly the heroes, and they should have a 99% chance of winning every single fight that they're in. Nope. They were very much the underdogs. I mean, one would argue that his victory was Pyrrhic because I think he still lost that battle, even though he took out my rat ogre at great personal cost. So any case, but the other thing too, which is interesting, kind of as a side tangent about those games, Shadow Dark is the same way, although it's very basic in its implementation. And it kind of is one of those things that kind of goes against what a lot of people really like about RPGs, which is when you leveled up in those games, a lot of times you gained Mordheim and stuff, you gained random new abilities. You gained random new skills. You didn't just pick one. And so there was an element of your character's progression that was outside of your hands. And I know that drives some people absolutely bonkers in the TTRPG space, but I got to admit, I love it. I love being surprised by where the game goes. I love, my character not turning out the way that I expected or intended it to be. Smith used to use as an example my wizard from our 3rd edition campaign. His name was Asinius Balstrom, and he was the archmage, or he was the head mage of the Band of the Burning Hand. That was what we ended up calling ourselves. And this was back in 3rd edition, and there was no retraining rules in 3rd edition. Okay, that wasn't something that came about yet. So when the game first started, I had this idea for Asinius of him being like an enchantment illusionist mage. Okay, I wanted him to really focus on. I thought illusions were really cool, and Smith and I had always been very in agreement that how illusions could be really cool and useful in a fun way. And he's a very creative person, so he goes with the flow. And so I was really into this. And so I remember at 1st level or whatever as a human, I picked up spell focus. Spell focus illusion or spell focus enchantment charm, maybe both of them. I was clearly investing my character into these elements. And then by the time we got to 3rd or 4th or 5th level, some things had changed in the campaign. Some of the choices that we had made, some of the magical items that we had acquired and stuff like that. My character had basically became an evoker, a blaster. And, was more known for burning hands and scorching rays and eventually fireballs than he was for illusion. And this was before, retraining. So my character just had spell focus, raising his DC for these classes of spells that I could cast. It wasn't like they were banned from me, but I just didn't. That wasn't who my character was anymore. That was an element of my character that had sort of been left behind. And I always thought that was, Smith always thought that was really cool because to him, that was real character progression. That was organic growth. How many of us, went to school and paid a shitload of money or whatever to go train to do this job, and now we do something completely differently? How many of us spent countless hours developing a skill or a hobby, and then life and something else came into the equation, and now we're doing something else. So, it's I think there's a fun to that. There's a visceralness to it that I really enjoy. And I know that it drives a lot of people crazy because what they want is unimpeded control over every aspect of their character. I don't mind input randomness. I don't mind when things here are your options and those were random. Just give me let me make some kind of choice. Anyways, look, I did not come here to be attacked over my ADHD. I mean, look, I'm not attacking anybody. I like both in different ways. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a value to that. So, anyways, it looks like I mostly caught up here. Ben says Mordheim is still a classic. I don't understand why they don't keep these specialist games in range. I think it's fantastic. But I do think that a lot of those war game campaigns can be really, really interesting instead. But the focus there to me is that's like a true role playing game in the sense that you're playing a game and the story is just emerging from the game that you are playing. I think that's really cool. I prefer semi-random. Input randomness to generate options and then choose from a short list. That is my preferred as well. It's basically kind of the Magic the Gathering kind of model. Give me a random selection of options, and then let me sort of pick what's best in there. And then my options change from round to round or something like that. Again, people get really upset with this because they want complete control, and they view that as a sort of a way to, to gain agency, which I don't mind. I mean, I think it's fine, but I like being pleasantly surprised. It's really interesting though, because there's a lot of people, because I will admit this, that like, input randomness followed by output randomness is kind of frustrating, right? Like if you give me random choices that I need to do, and then I'm not even sure if they're going to work because of, we need a die roll, that can be really, really frustrating, Like if you're going to give me random options to do, let that just work. Let that be the decision that I'm making, which of these really, really useful thing I'm doing. The new Modifius skirmish game is heavily influenced by Mordheim. What game is that? Is that the Cthulhu game, Ben? Or is that, what game is that? I see there's this Battle Space game, but that's a solo game. No, 5 Parsecs from Home? I mean, there's that 5 Leagues from the Borderlands game. I don't know. If that's the game, I have it. It's just in the shrink wrap. Oops. Okay, Cthulhu Skirmish. Okay. Blood Bowl, I don't like football, but I like Blood Bowl is so random and so crazy and so chaotic. Honestly, I don't know how Bob doesn't play Blood Bowl. Like Blood Bowl to me is like the ultimate drinking game because it's like, it's kind of strategic, but there's so many random dice rolls that like everything, you're more just showing up to see what craziness is going to happen. Really, honestly, I personally think. I actually have a board game. I have Blood Bowl, but I have a board game that was it was called, it was like the old Stratomatic baseball game. It was called Blood Bowl Season Manager. And it's a Blood Bowl board game where you don't actually play the Blood Bowl games. You just like draft a team, and then the games are sort of like decided kind of procedurally, and then try to play out. You make trades with other people. Players get hurt. You try to build up your roster. It was a really interesting approach to the game. I only played it a couple times. I can't remember if it was particularly good, but it's called Blood Bowl Season Manager. Bob would love Blood Bowl. I think he would too, for sure. Yeah. Isaiah agrees as well. Where's my D20 Heartbreaker game that uses dexterity game mechanics like Kerplunk? It's like the new Dread, right? It's like we use Kerplunk. Kerplunk might even be more. Oh, you see, okay. In Dread, you have a Jenga tower. And so there's this sense that skill is involved. And there is, to be clear. But obviously, as you pull more and more and more and more blocks, the risk of the fall becomes higher and higher and higher. But with Kerplunk, right, there's less skill involved. By the way, Kerplunk, for people who don't remember, it's like the plastic tube, and it has all these little like plastic straws that go through the middle of it, and then there's a bunch of marbles that sit on top of it, and you have to pull out straws one at a time. But what's really interesting about it is, in Dread, either the tower falls or it doesn't. But with Kerplunk, part of the way that the game works is that sometimes you get like these minor slips, and like the point scoring is basically like you want as few marbles as you can have, and so like you might pull one of the straws, and like the whole cylinder of marbles doesn't fall, but like 2 or 3 marbles fall, pop, pop, and it's this really dramatic moment. But like you could do that, but then make the marbles like almost like a form of damage. Right. And so obviously, if it's a critical, if you pull it out and like the whole cylinder collapses into the tray, your character has died because you just took like, 20 damage or something like that. But your characters might have like 5 or 6 or 7, life points, stress points, whatever, body points, hit points. And so you could have this fun kind of slow buildup of tension because unlike in Dread, where it's either it falls or it doesn't fall, Kerplunk has that kind of like you can get those little miniature releases of tension, which I think is fine. Nutrimancer says, sounds like a cool mechanic. Do you get to say, this is for all the marbles? Absolutely you do. And that's something that I tried to do. Of course, I tried to gamify. If you ever watched Dread in the Dark with Dread and Dragons in the Dark, I think is what we called it. I tried to like gamify Dread a bit more than I did than you normally would when we played, because I was playing with Smith and Vin and Bob. And one of the things that you could do with Kerplunk, right, or you could do this with Dread too, but people don't, is like this idea of like you saying, okay, well, if you pull one straw, you will get success. But if you pull two straws, then you get great success, right? So you have like a fun way of sort of, letting people push their luck a little bit. Which End Up says, man, are you talking directly to me? I love Blood Bowl, D4E, and Mordheim. I mean, those are all great games. I mean, Plinko is a lot more. Plinko actually, KC, is kind of the opposite of what I want. Plinko appears to grant you agency, but it doesn't, because there's so many random steps between your agency and the final outcome that any input that you put into is essentially meaningless. There's no strategy to that, right? So Plinko, Plinko's the worst in a way, because it gives you the illusion of making a very impactful choice, and it actually doesn't matter at all. It's just all completely random. Exactly, Nutromancer. True Dungeon has bar shuffleboard for combat. I mean, I don't know if you're making fun of that, GM Scott. I liked that. I mean, I thought that was really, really fun. So Plinko is like Path Builder. I mean, one of the more derogatory things that, Smith will, not even Smith at this point. I mean, I think Strat said this the other day in the GM Council thing for Northern Reaches, said like, Pathfinder, where you can make all the choices matter, but, none of the decisions do, so it's like, you get to make as many decisions and choices as you want, but at the end of the day, they kind of all, come out in the wash, and you end up with the same outcome. That was like my big critique of, I don't know if I want to call it a critique. It's just kind of the reality of the situation. But that was my one of my big takeaways from the DC 20 game, is with him having that prime stat. He is basically fully out, just coming out and saying, this doesn't matter. Everybody's just going to be the same. And the choices that you make kind of don't impact your ability to perform, but because you need to be this tall to ride. That's the way these games work. Each player could have their own Kerplunk tower or tube. See, now you're thinking about merchandise sales, Beowulf. I love it. It was fun. We're talking about True Dungeon, by the way, which is like Escape Room and Dungeons and Dragons, which is usually run at big conventions like PAX and Gen Con and stuff like that. I thought it was really fun when I did it. I agree. It is very expensive for what you get out of it, but I do think it is. I think it's an interesting and fun experience. This was like for me, it was one of the coolest moments. I don't know if they did the same thing with you, GM Scott, but one of the things I love in RPGs, or when a TTRPG does this, is where the game makes the illusion that the player is more skilled than they already are. So, and there's good ways to do this, there's bad ways to do this. So let's use an example. It's not necessarily a bad way, but it's a very obvious way. Is flashbacks from Forged in the Dark, right? You're at a situation and you think, oh, it'd be so good. It'd be so great right now if I had a gun waiting for me inside the bathroom so that I could go to the bathroom and get the gun, and then I could come back and avenge my father and shoot these guys. Talk about The Godfather, if you didn't miss it. And so, the idea is like, yeah, that would be a really good idea. Yeah, that would be a baller, mafia payback move. You're not a criminal mastermind. You didn't think of that, but the mechanics give us a way to sort of, say, hey, but you thought of it eventually, and we'd like for you to sort of be able to sort of make that true. So that's like a very in-your-face way of doing it. But when I played True Dungeon, everybody had a different class, and when I played the one time, I was the bard. And what they gave me, everybody had there was like a 10-minute period before you went into the dungeon or something. That's a prep period. And they gave me this little book. It was like a spiral bound, almost looked like a children's, what are those things called? Board books. And on each, there was maybe 20 or 15 of these like index cards. And on each one was a symbol, a rune. And it would say what that rune meant. Danger, healing, fire, right? That kind of basic stuff. Good, evil. And I had these 10 minutes to sort of try to memorize, if you will, what these runes meant. And then at the end of the 10 minutes, when we went into the dungeon, the game master or whoever was running the game or the prep people, they took that book from me to give to the next group, I imagine. So then when you get into the game, and when you get into the rooms, there's no like overt thing where they're like, you must remember what this rune is. It doesn't work that way. It's like, there's like 5, random vials on the top of a desk, and one of them has a rune on it. Do you remember what that rune is? When you're looking around the room, you suddenly notice that one of the runes for danger is, is on a stone, and you go, okay, guys, that we should not push that stone, or at least I don't think we should push that stone. That rune is a symbol for danger, right? And I thought that was really cool because to the people I was playing with, it seemed like, oh wow, Derek is this super knowledgeable bard. He knows these ancient runes, and I thought that was so fun. I thought that was so cool because it made it really sold the emulation of me being this really cool bard. One of my least favorite things that I've ever done in any RPG ever, and I don't know why this is true. It just shouldn't matter at all, but for me, it's one of my personal bugaboos. For whatever reason, when you make certain skill checks in D&D, it can feel kind of satisfying because it feels like you did it, right? The GM describes this, trap-laden antechamber full of pressure plates and trip wires and spinning daggers and spinning knives and arrows and dart traps and like flaming jets of flame. And, you're a rogue, he's like, well, you're like, I have to get the key so that we can get out of here. You're like, I'm going full parkour, so my character runs out. And the GM says, make an acrobatics check. DC, whatever. Whoopplestein coming in with $50 for the Southern Beaches hype. Whoopplestein, I am excited. I'm super excited for you guys. Thank you so much for the super chat. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to feel different than Northern Reaches, which is good. It's a little bit of a change. And I also think that it's going to feel, not only is it going to feel different because of the way the structure of the game is working, but I'm interested because, part of the joke here is that, you guys are all on vacation. Smith and I didn't have, the opportunity to deploy, our season 3. Smith wasn't able to finish it on time. And so, we'll go back to work next year. But because of that, we're just, we're allowing all the ancestries. We're allowing all the classes. People could be all whatever weird thing they want. And I've always personally felt, Whoople, that, the community and me and Smith, there was kind of friction between us. Smith and I had this vision of what we wanted Northern Reaches to be, and part of us, was accepting that the community wanted to push it and pull it into a different direction. And there was always a little bit of a power struggle there. But in this game, I've set down the reins, and I am letting you guys take this in whatever crazy direction that you want. So thank you so much for that, Whoopplestein. So I'm excited for it. And I have some fun ideas. People already talk about creating a volleyball mini game, and I'm 100% in for it. That is exact. In Northern Reaches, that would have bothered me to no end. In Southern Beaches, I'm a fan of it. Okay, so Rogue. trap-filled room. I'm going to flip across. I'm going to parkour. And the rogue rolls and rolls well. And the GM says the DC's 25. And the rogue goes, boom. Oh my God. I passed. And I passed. I did it. I flipped through everything. It feels very satisfying, I think. I mean, it's just a skill check. I get it. Skill checks aren't the most exciting thing, but same thing. The stone door is beginning to close, grinding against the thing. The barbarian rushes over. I'm going to grab the door and hold it open. Move! Everybody out now! And then GM's like, you got to make a strength check, DC 20. And the barbarian rolls, 15 and goes 22. And everyone's like, yeah, he feels strong. I think. I know the skill checks aren't the most exciting thing in the game, but sometimes if you're really involved in the game and that tension in that moment, rolling well, getting that thing, it can feel like a real success. What has never felt like a good success to me is the knowledge check, because it never feels like the player is the one who's smart, because everybody else is sitting around the table. So, the player goes, let me think about this for a moment. Rolls an intelligence check, and the GM says, oh, DC 20, and the GM says 22. And the player goes, and then basically the player goes, what do I know? And then everybody has to listen to all this knowledge, but it's coming from the GM, not the player. And so I've always found knowledge checks to be so uninspired. And I don't know what the solution is, by the way, but I'm just saying that with True Dungeon, the knowledge felt like it was coming from me. And I really, 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 really liked that a lot, because it gave me the fantasy of being the wise world traveled bard who knows, what's up, right. And right. Well, no. And that is literally how exciting as it goes. The bard goes, oh, what do I know about this rune? And the GM goes, make a knowledge arcana check. Roll. And you're like 22. And the GM goes, well, you know that you've studied many runes over the course of the time. This is a rune that was used in the ancient southern kingdoms, but hasn't been used in over 500 years. It's a rune of warding, but also of caution. It's designed to keep something in and other people out. It's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. It's more of just like a, hey, respect it. It's almost like a crosswalk line. And then the bard goes, okay, I tell everybody that. Right. And it's very unsatisfying. I think it's just very, very unsatisfying. I don't know what the situation is, but that is the situation. Now, Beowulf says, make a knowledge check. On a success, you get narrative control to decide what is true. Now, Beowulf, that is something that I like to do whenever I play PBTA games. And what's interesting about that is if we look at like Dungeon World, for example, Dungeon World has a move called Spout Lore. Okay. And Spout Lore is, quite frankly, not my favorite move, because if we look at what Spout Lore does, okay, it's World of Warcraft, obviously. If we look at what Spout Lore does, Spout Lore says, whenever you consult your accumulated knowledge, roll plus int. Okay. On a 10 or higher, the GM will tell you something interesting and useful about the situation or about the subject relevant to your situation. On a 7 to 9, the GM will only tell you something interesting. It's up to you to make it useful. The GM might ask you, how do you know this? Tell them the truth now. And I don't really like this move. In fact, when I play Dungeon World games, I don't really follow this move. In fact, I make my moves a lot more like what you're describing, where I let the player, if they roll 10 or higher, sort of get to make a narrative knowledge true about the situation. And if they roll a 7, 8, or 9, basically they get to say something that is true. And then I get to say, but, and kind of add something that, again, following my agendas and my principles, that is kind of like, they add an opportunity and they add and I add a sort of a risk, or a threat. So I prefer to do it that way. But of course, that could also be very unsatisfying, because now it doesn't feel like knowledge. Now it's quantum knowledge. And so that, that is for some people, that can be very unsatisfying. Ben says recall knowledge is pure BS. I don't like it. It is very unsatisfying to me, but I don't know. I don't know of any truly great ways to get around it, because how does the player know something that they don't know? They don't. Like, how do we determine, how do we create a situation where your character knows something that you yourself don't know and have it still feel satisfying? And I don't know that there's an easy answer to that. Yeah, Nutrimancer. I mean, listen, I'm all for, giving the players some form of agency and control. I think that is totally great. I mean, I think that's definitely the best way to do it, Also a possibility. Give the player narrative control and the rune becomes a rune of Rooney McRuneface. Also true. Matthew Parker says, with that many ads, it must be fandom. It is indeed dungeonworld.fandom.com. Horrible site. Somehow it comes up like top in Google. I don't even know why. Ben saying that is it in this arena that Call of Cthulhu reigns supreme? I honestly hate when a GM uses the player's lack of in-world knowledge against the PC. As do I. In fact, I despise gotchas more than anything. I really I go out of my way to make sure that the players probably know too much because I want them making informed decisions and I want them to be able to feel. I hate gotchas, generally speaking. So I'm right there with you, which is one of the reasons why, the old rules, when you critically fail a recall knowledge check in, which is supposed to be a secret role in Pathfinder 2, you're supposed to lie to the players. It is by far probably my least favorite rule in RPG history, actually. Can't stand it. Beowulf says the GM could give the PC a handbook of useful lore that they can read. Well, so I experimented with this idea once, Beowulf, but it never really took off the ground. It doesn't really solve all of the issues. But I had this idea. So when I was doing mega dungeons, I wanted to, right? So what gets rewarded gets repeated, and what the game rewards experience points for is a way of saying this is what this game wants you to do. This is what this game cares about. And so when I was running one of my mega dungeon games, I gave experience points for the characters exploring, for finding secret doors, for uncovering secret passages that led to new levels. Finding a stairway to the next lower level of this dungeon, this big dungeon, granted you more experience points. Discovering discovering important rooms, sort of like you might call them marquee rooms of the level. Oh, you found the Chapel of Blood, maybe something that they even heard of before. Got you experience. And of course, I wanted people to find treasure, so treasure got you experience. And I wanted people to maybe fight, so fighting could get you experience, right? Anything that you give experience points for gets the players motivated. So I had this idea of, okay, I have, before the game has started, a list of lore. It's kind of divided into, basic lore, advanced lore, super secret lore. And each of these is just like one little knowledge or snippet or secret of the campaign. And every time you uncover one of these pieces, it's worth a certain amount of experience points. More for the big secrets, less for the lesser secrets. And my idea was to put these onto note cards and to have it well organized. And when a character got into a situation where they discovered it, number one, it was a cool way for me to physically hand them the card to represent the knowledge that their character had gained. But also it was a great way when a character figured something out, or if they, passed a check or did something in the right context, in the right moment, for me to hand that player that index card and say, read it at your own time or whatever. The information, though, is going to come from you, and you're going to interpret it, and you're going to be the source of that information going forward. And I couldn't even answer the question anymore because I don't have the card. So if you have a question about that particular piece of lore, you got to go to that player. So I think that while not necessarily a very low prep solution, because it's definitely not low prep, I thought that was kind of a cool idea that I wanted to do, or at least try. Let's see here. Give the players complete narrative control, and the game either devolves into The Young and the Restless or a cheesy horror flick. Well, it depends who you're playing with, Mike. Maybe if I played with you, Mike, it would turn into a cheesy horror flick, or maybe it would turn into a Young and the Restless, Mike. Who knows? Let's see here. Then you sit around and watch someone read something that you already wrote in advance. Yeah, I mean, that's probably also going to happen as well. Some groups, says John, some groups I've played with barely know what campaign setting that they are in. Now to that end, Ben, I've said this before, but one of my campaigns, I had a buddy who was a wizard. I was a GM. He was a wizard. He was like a diviner, or at least maybe he wasn't a diviner, but he had access to a lot of divination magics. And he had so many divination spells. I used to just give him a copy of the map of the dungeon level, like the complete copy of the map. My only rule was it wasn't labeled, but it was the complete map. And my only rule was he couldn't bring it to the session. But like between sessions, he could study it. He could try to memorize it as best as he could, but he couldn't like reference it during the game session. He couldn't pull it out. He couldn't physically look at it. And so that was pretty cool. But of course, that assumes that your player's willing to do the homework of, looking something up. But that had a really cool moment because then his character, the player at the table, the party would be moving down a hallway and he would just kind of suddenly go, hold on, I think there might be like a secret door or there's something, maybe there's a stairway or something. I feel like there's something to the left. And I always thought that was like a really cool experience. So Lance in chat was that player. Yeah, look at it on my phone before heading over. Right, refresh it. It was almost kind of, it was very inspired by that True Dungeon thing. The idea of like giving them this information, but they can't use it during the game. They have to use it before the game. But yeah, okay. So, anyways, so this summer, unfortunately, I really didn't get a ton of opportunities to play a whole lot of new RPGs. Now, I got a chance to do a bunch of first looks. We took a look at Heart and Valor and DC-20, Girl by Moonlight. But I think in the last 6 months or so, I think the two games that have really stood out to me have been The Wild Sea. I think that game has a tremendous amount of potential. And while I'm still not 100% sure I am sold on the exact setting of it, it does work really well. Better than I ever thought it would be. I think that it's a really interesting way of... It reminds me of how much I like Forge in the Dark style mechanics and using those kind of ideas. And it's done in a really particular way. And I think the other thing that I would take away is I think it's too late. I think the ship has sailed. But I wish or thought, I don't know, there was a time and a place where I had a lot more opportunity to play RPGs. And now I don't know. I'm not being fair to it even in this assessment. But I have to say that I was pretty impressed and interested in Numenera. I mean, this is a game that I kickstarted 10 years ago and basically read through it. I think I played it once and then we never played it again. So going back to, the discovery or whatever, the sort of revision of it was basically like a first look. And it is a really, elegant system. And I think it does work really well. And I think Monty Cook is a really smart guy. But I feel like I never really gave that game the chance, maybe that it deserved, because it wasn't narrative and indie enough to feel like a narrative indie game, but it also clearly wasn't just a D20 game. So it kind of lived in this kind of strange world. And I'll also be the first to admit the Monty Cook settings for Cypher haven't really excited me that much. Numenera isn't really my favorite idea, this sort of hyper-futuristic, post-apocalyptic sort of quasi-fantasy, science fantasy kind of, it's not my favorite, thing. The strange, some of those settings that they have out for the Cypher setting just don't really appeal to me that much. Random shout out to 7th second edition. It's $3 on Drive-Thru RPG today. I did do the stream. Yeah, I did 7th. I did that back in the springtime, and we talked about buckling swashes. I think for my money, I don't know. Like if I was playing like sort of like a swashbuckling pirate game, it'd be tough because I really like. Help me out, Ben. Here we go. I really like the mechanics in this game. Okay, this is a Broken Compass. Now known as Outgunned. And for my money, like this is just like such a great, fun, like swashbuckling, pulpy kind of, and I get that 7th isn't 100% that, but it kind of is that. And so, if this is Broken Compass, and you have Outgunned, if they had, I don't know, swords and sails, and they basically made a 7th version of that, I think that would probably be the best thing. Exactly, which end up, and I don't like Jack Vance. I don't like the Dying Earth series. I tried to read it. I've read the first book. I never read any of his other books because it was like, oh, you have to. It's D&D. It's the Vancian casting. But like, I was never into that as a situation. Yeah, GM Scott got it right. It was Broken Compass. Oh, it is raining. Hold on a second. I want to check to see if my window is up. I'll be right back. Alrighty. Sorry about that. I didn't think it was going to rain. I was just looking at the weather report earlier today. It said it wasn't going to rain. Oh, so there you go. So, what did I learn this summer? Well, I learned a couple things. Number one, is I like this game. I do. But I do have some problems with this game. It would probably take a long stream to go through it all, and I probably will once the final session is done. But there's some issues with this campaign setting and the tone of it that I'm not a fan of. It's not necessarily an indictment on the game system. It's just me. But it has not delivered as in the way that I wanted it to.
$20.
Thank you, Ben.
Broken Compass gets the pulp action perfect. 7th Sea gets the dramatic story arc perfect. They are very different and satisfying in different ways.
That's an interesting way to look at it. And I definitely agree with you that it gets the pulp action component thing. I think viewing 7th Sea as more of a narrative arc simulator type game is kind of an interesting way of viewing it. But I mean, it definitely, it has a good way of doing that. So yeah, I agree. I mean, but I will say, for pulp action, I think this is the best. I think a lot of people say Savage Worlds and stuff. I think this is, and this was a Ben A himself recommendation. So this was I think we did this last year, Ben, that we did that first look on that game. But I will acquiesce to your knowledge, mastery of Seventh Sea and its narrative arc potential. But that's an interesting way of drawing a comparison between the two of them, and I don't disagree with you. Good night, Voy. Good night. I love the way Forbidden Lands does their adventure sites. Yes, maybe. There's like a lot of strangeness to the way that their adventure sites. I like that they're not linear. I like that they don't have an agenda. I like that it's just like, this is a place that is exciting. I mean, that's just, to be fair, that's just like the way that D&D dungeons used to be. This is some crazy place with some crazy stuff going on, and it's just the way that it is. So I do like that aspect to the game. But I think, I don't know, I think that the mechanics of the Year Zero engine and the way that they're implemented in the context of the game, I feel like it's kind of it's deadly and dangerous without like actually being deadly and dangerous. And I think I think it feels more dangerous than it is, but it like really tries to pretend like it is. And a lot of people say, "Oh, it's a super scary death game," but I think it's very easy for people to get really strong at something and not really be challenged. And survival skill is just used way too much. And I think the overland travel can get kind of boring. And I don't really like the random encounters that come with the GMG book. So, anyways, we were going to play this. I wanted to play 10 to 20 sessions. I wanted to take, maybe 6 months, 5 months to play those sessions. We started playing this at the beginning of the year. We played it throughout the spring into the summer, and we're still not finished. And we've only had like 11 or 12 sessions. And so we've been playing very infrequently. I will, that's just been on me. That's been on Smith. It's been on Bob. It's been on Kaz. My whole home group. Not George. He's always available. He was not available one time. But for me though, we're coming to a natural ending point with our campaign on this, and I'm okay with it to a certain extent. It hasn't grabbed me the way that I want it to. So the other game that I had sort of my first experience with was Shadow Dark. And Kelsey's a lovely, lovely person. She won some very nice awards. But we had a chance to play that at Origins. And I got to admit, I like the book. I think it's well designed. I think it's simple. It's easy. I played it. I made 90% of the things up during the session because it's just D20, just roll high. But I don't fully understand why people are acting. It's the same thing with. It's the same thing with Morkborg. Why people are so empowered by these settings, because they are, they feel truly empowered by these games and these systems, and I don't quite understand why. And I don't know what it is. And I think it's, there's certainly an appeal to, like John Harper has written many very rules-light game engines. Lasers and Feelings, Lady Blackbird, Ghost Rails, Danger Patrol. He's written a whole World of Dungeons. He's written a whole litany of them. Mustang. But, I think John would be the first person to say that, these games aren't necessarily deep. They're simple, and they're simple for a reason, because they're designed to be, quick and easy to play and not really hold your gaming attention for a very extended long period of time. There's like this weird, like, I don't know, uprising against, rules. And I think, granted, I think the opposite is also a problem when people make these insanely complex games with hundreds of different feats and stuff like that. But, I think playing a game and having rules and rules that you can interact with and having those rules have some teeth, I think is a strength. And, there's kind of like this big push, it's almost like a Luddite, like, oh, down with the rules. We should just, make everything up, and that's fine. You could do that. I did that when I played Shadow Dark, and what I discovered is I lost interest very quickly. You know, and maybe you're different, but I have discovered that while it's fun and I love just kind of freewheeling and making anything up and quantuming everything and just kind of funny. That you do reach a point where you kind of you're like, okay, well, that was fun for the last couple of times that we did it, but are we really going to do that 3 or 4 more, 5 more times? No. And that's why whenever I play any of these like old school type games, after 3 to 5 sessions, I'm like, I'm not even saying that was a bad experience. I'm just saying after 3 to 5 sessions, I was like, I enjoyed that experience. I'm glad I had it, but the game is no longer, capturing my interest or keeping me attentive. Sure, the campaign is really interesting. The characters we've met are really interesting. My character's really interesting. Those are all really great. But the game does matter. And I do want to be interested in those game mechanics. And so Shadow Dark sort of, drove that home to me a little bit more. But that being said, there's plenty of games where I feel like trapped and stifled, by the rules. I think Forbidden Lands is worth the money for the legends and weird monster generators. The rest you can skip. No, I mean there's a lot to really like about some of the elements of the game, but sorry, Tomas, but I've read a number of Year Zero Engine games. I've played a number of Year Zero Engine games. I'm sorry, Free League games. I've read a number of Free League games. I've played a number of Free League games, including Year Zero Engine games, Dragon Bane. Run those games. The books are not edited or laid out very well. There's a lot of weird miscontradictions. The books are hard to flip through. At my table, when people are looking through the rule books, you frequently hear a lot of confusion about where something might be. Sometimes things appear in multiple different spots. But you need to look at each one because they only contain a part of the information that you need. And it's very frustrating. And so, I think Dragon Bane suffers from this as well. Forbidden Lands definitely suffers from this. So I do think that there's and I don't know if it's like a translation problem or something, but some of these books are not, in my personal opinion, laid out the best, and they're not edited as well as I'd like them to be. Let's see. KC says, for Morkborg and Shadow Dark, I think it's the comfort of it being relatively popular and in the zeitgeist. Easy to leave the gravity of 5e with momentum from popularity and backing of YouTubers. Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is, I don't, as a content creator, I would tell you, ignore all content creators, and who cares what we say and what we care and what we're into and what we have the support and backing of. All the more reason to say, fuck you, Derek. I like this game. You should do that. Anyways, I get it. I mean, it's people who want to play anything different, and this is, close enough that it lets them make that transition, and that's fine. And Eric, I will agree with that. Shadow Dark is beautifully laid out, and she definitely deserved the Ennie for best design. Best game, best rules. I mean, that's for the other people to decide. I mean, I think it's really done well, and obviously it's based off of a really great game, and I think she's clearly tapped into something here. But her design is unquestionably fantastic. It's very clear, precise. Things are exactly where you expect them to be. Pages are referenced well. Everything you need is on these 2-page spreads. The back of the book is these just, easy to use tables and oracles and generators. It is a delight to use at the table. Blade Runner is a great game. Terrible GM screen, and some info is hard to find, but I am finding it worth the lift personally. But I like playing trauma RPGs. Maybe I'm crazy here. Let me get a poll going. Okay. GM screens. Hold on a second. All right. Poll in chat. When it comes to GM screens, what are we liking here? Like, what do people, what do people want from their GM screen? I don't know why the YouTube capture is sort of making the GM screen, that thing look so terrible in chat. So, for me personally, I don't know where it is up on this thing behind me here, but like one of the biggest disappointments of the Avatar game. I mean, I'm serious. This is crazy, but this is 100% serious. One of my biggest disappointments from the Avatar game, and from like the from the Legend of the Five Rings game, I don't see where it is, has been that the GM screens are tall, right? Somebody said, no, so I said tall or nothing. I meant like it's gotta be tall. You'll either use a tall screen or you'll use nothing. So that's what tall or nothing means. Anyways, so like it really bothers me because the adventures in Rokugan, okay, which is the 5e version of Legend of the Five Rings, the 5th edition D&D, they got this awesome, right? They've got this awesome landscape short GM screen, which I really love. Here's the Dragonbane screen. And of course my filter's on, by the way. So, it's this, right? Wow, that thing looks really desaturated and transparent. It sure does. Boop, there we go. So yeah, very cool, very evocative. But some games are still coming out with these really, really tall GM screens. And then the other one was like the micro screens. So like, I think like Old School Essentials. I don't know if I have one of these like quickly and readily apparent available, but it's just like, it's like digest size basically. But anyways, all right. Well, 80% of you say it's got to be landscape. So, that's pretty good. Twiggy said that they misvoted then. So, yes, I need something that doesn't block my line of sight, especially nowadays because I'm rolling my, I want to see players. I want to see the map. I need to, reach over the screen because I'm rolling my dice on the other side of the screen. Gabriel says, about translation, this is how we non-native English speakers always feel about TTRPG translations. You always lose something in the translation process and reorganize the layout. And you know what, Gabriel? I understand it. I mean, that is very much a difficulty. And I will say, for the most part, I have really enjoyed playing some of these, not English companies' RPGs. Fabula Ultima, Free League. But, sometimes you do see those little weird bits of, change, some of those translational issues come through, C7D5A6 says, I'm having a near year-long campaign in Shadowdark. Most fun comes from bizarre mega dungeon, not the system. But system helps to run for the ever-changing group of players and dying characters. Well, right. I mean, obviously if the game is fun and everyone's really engaged with the game, then yeah, I think that can keep the game going. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're absolutely right. Maybe the problem is that, my games and my campaigns and my adventures and the characters have all been pretty boring. They haven't been interesting enough. They haven't been involved enough. And so, the system has to do the heavy lifting, right? The system has to be what's bringing you back. And if there's too much pressure or emphasis on the system, then if the system isn't doing the pulling its weight, it maybe falls apart. And maybe the problem is that these systems can't do that. But if you have enough of engagement and involvement in all these different other aspects, maybe that's a problem. So maybe that's the issue. Maybe it's just, maybe my games have just sucked lately. I don't know. Have you gone the rules heavy direction and played a lot of Mithras or Against the Dark Master? I have not played Mithras. Mithras, and I have not played Against the Dark Master. That being said, I do have my copy of Against the Dark Master. I don't know how to feel about actually saying I'm going to play this game. I think this would, I don't know. I think it would destroy me. Not because it's bad, but just because I think I would end up getting into a situation where I'd be like, I just don't care. I just don't care about all these rules anymore. Do I have a favorite Forged in the Dark game? Do I have a favorite Forged in the Dark game? I mean, it's probably Blades in the Dark. I mean, I think it's really good at the game is really good at supporting that particular setting. Scum and Villainy has been very fun as well. I think Scum and Villainy suffers from the problem, at least in my group where it did, is Scum and Villainy, you know, I think it leads to people imagining their characters being like these kind of heroes, these kind of pulp action heroes from like Star Wars and, you know, or Cowboy Bebop or something. And some of the rules of Forged in the Dark aren't necessarily good for that. And like, you know, having Luke Skywalker having a vice might not be the most appropriate thing. But like Blades in the Dark really leans well into like the, you know, gritty traumas and all this other stuff. So I think that Blades in the Dark, I think it's probably my favorite. I mean, it's the GOAT, right? It's the original. It's the best. Versus D would break Bob's brain. I mean, it would absolutely break Bob's brain for sure. Derek's favorite Forged in the Dark game is Snowstorms and Landing Gears. Yes, I mean that is also a very good game. It's well known in the genre. Sorry if you're late seeing this, but my favorite board games are those that try to mitigate RNG. Yes, I mean for me, you know, some of my favorite board games in game, or some of my favorite board games in the genre are, you know, like Uwe Rosenberg games like Caverna, Agricola, Le Havre, you know, games where, you know, you see the actions, you take the action, you get the benefit. You know, it's not like a dice roll. There's no determination. There's no really very minimal, if any, random luck at all. Or if there is randomness, it affects everybody equally, and it's just who can adapt to the game. So that way it's not the same game every time you play it. I'm looking at you, Puerto Rico, which is the same game every time you play it. Anyways, Scum and Villainy works for Firefly. Sort of, Eric. And the reason why I say sort of is because, you know, there's still things in Scum and Villainy, you know, the characters of Firefly were more grounded. I'm not saying they were like big damn action heroes. But, you know, I think some of the characters, some of the grind, some of the way that the characters get like chewed up and spit out in Blades in the Dark games and or Forged in the Dark games isn't necessarily appropriate for Firefly. You know, I think we should see these characters growing, not, you know, becoming, you know, because I think the ultimate outcome of most Blades in the Dark characters is you get chewed up and spit out. What's up, JP? Good to see you, buddy. JP and I got to hang out at Gen Con and share dinner at Buca de Beppo. And if you haven't seen JP's channel, you should. JP's one of the few channels on the internet in the gaming space where I think I've seen every single episode of his channel. But I really love the fantastic art that folks like JP do and MapCrow. So definitely check those out. That's the tactile nature of RPGs is something that I think is, you know, is lacking. You know, I really appreciate it. I'm still one of those people who just love sitting down with a pad of graph paper and drawing a dungeon. I think that it gives us this very personal and intimate connection to the world that we're creating in a way that very few things else. Now, I'm not a particularly artistically creative guy, so the best I can do is draw squares on a map. But, you know, for those that can, I think it's pretty cool. And I think JP's got a great, lovely channel, so good to see you. Yeah, awesome. It was great running into you. Maybe I'll catch you at the next one, buddy. John says SNV could do Star Wars well, but it has to be more Andor than A New Hope. It was on my list when I was planning my new. Yes, John, I haven't seen Andor, but from every, you know, Rogue One, where kind of everybody dies at the end, right? That to me is much more scum and villainy than and all those characters themselves were kind of fundamentally flawed in some ways, anyways. And so this was kind of like their redemptive arc, was dying on that planet, Scarif. But I do think that is more in the line of what we're talking about here as well. But I've not seen Andor, but I've heard it's much more gritty. It's not like these everything's clean, surgical, we're all Jedis type thing, which I think is great. GM Scott, it's not one of those how to draw an owl type maps. No. It's if anything, it's very it's realistic in the sense that the maps that and the art projects that he's doing are very like, you might look at it and go, wow, this is really basic and simple. I really think that I could do this. And I think to the most part you can. Plus there's, secretly some pretty good RPG advice in there as well. And it's not just an art channel, so it's good stuff. Mark says, Derek liking your channel is the kiss of death. Well, I mean, JP doesn't need my help. I mean, let's see. JP is rocking almost 100K subs. Coming up on your silver button, buddy. I can only imagine. maybe in 30 or 40 years I'll get there. Okay. So Satanic Panic, we had a long-running game of Wicked Ones on our Patreon Discord, run by Darth Gorlock, and he really loves that game. So he has nothing but great things to say about it. So I think I wish you the best luck. I think that I've heard it's really, really, really great, even if I haven't gotten a chance to play it. As well. JP says, yeah, it's taken a while. I mean, listen, you're much further along than I am, but you'll get there. You'll get there. I honestly, if I ever got to 25K, that would be where I would be very, very happy about that. I don't think realistically, unless I start making much more wider content appeal, that appeals to a wider group of people, which I never will. But if I did, I think I'd be very happy with that. This conversation needs more GBM. GBN. I mean, we did the first look on GBM. So GBM, for those who don't know, is Girls by Moonlight. It is the Magic Girl Forged in the Dark RPG. And has a lot of changes to the system. And I can't speak on them super intelligently enough, but we've had a long running Girl by Moonlight campaign running on our Patreon as well. It seems to do some things interesting, which I really, really, am excited about. I like seeing people take the game in a slightly different direction and use different things. I know some people were complaining about it, saying, "Oh, it's not Magic Girl enough," but I think fundamentally, I think it's a really interesting, conversation to have. Is how does that game deliver on the promise of that genre under the context of the heist system, which it does seem to do. You may have to join the Patreon. Well, I'd love to see you there. Tim, WotC has to come out with a 6th edition. It has to be good for you to go mainstream. Tim, that's probably right. It's so funny, though, people are just like even with D&D 2024. I mean, again, part of the thing is I didn't feel particularly betrayed by Wizards of the Coast because I didn't buy any of this stuff. I never had a D&D Beyond subscription. So when they started changing everything and, I'm going to delete the OGL, I'm like, I didn't own any of this third-party stuff. None of it affected me personally, but also I was always kind of like, oh, it's their game. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I get they released the OGL license, but I mean, it was always their game. This idea of it being like, they don't own the game, we own the game. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I mean, they don't own your books that you have, but, is the game theirs? Yeah, it is. I mean, anyways, so with D&D 2024, I'm kind of like, the brief amount that I have seen, I'm like, oh, seems kind of cool to me. I mean, it seems kind of fun to me. I'm like, I'm kind of interested in it, but, everyone else is like, oh, I can't believe it. And it's like, why can't you believe it? I don't understand why people find it so hard to believe that I don't mind 5th edition D&D. Now, I will say, Tim, I love a new edition. I am not one of those people that'll complain about a new edition. I will be freely admit I am showing my privilege here. A new edition of a game comes out. I'm like, awesome. I get to buy all the same books again. This is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. Hopefully they'll do it better this time, right? Hope springs eternal with a new edition. And I always hope for bigger, better, more elegant, more just figuring out a new solution rather than just more of the same. So I like new editions, and I like new editions to, really to shake things up a bit and try to take the game in a different direction. But alas, not everybody feels that way. What's up, Boothby? Good to see you. Girls by Moonlight campaign number 2 wraps on Saturday. Girls by Moonlight number 3 campaign 3 starts on Sunday. There you go. Kalana says, it's the only Forge in the Dark variant I've read that makes a significant enough departure from the core gameplay loop to deliver a significantly different feel. And that is saying something. And obviously they had to make several, significant subsystem changes to achieve that. But that's good. I mean, that's good. The system should deliver on the promises and the inherent premise of the setting. Our buddy Vin is here. Look at Ben and Vin and Tim all in the same thing. What is it? Is it 2021 again? What's going on here? We've got all the greats in here. The game is definitely theirs. People pay for things. I mean, I try to whenever I can. Derek's version of 5e is just to run Dungeon World instead. I mean, there are the thing about Dungeon World is, or running D&D like Dungeon World is just that I want players to feel like they are always, engaged, always making decisions, always sort of, at the forefront of agency. And, there's a lot of D20 mechanics that can oftentimes lead to just, I feel like, very unsatisfactory outcomes. And in this day and age, back when I used to play 3 sessions a week of D&D, and I was playing, 12 hours a week of D&D, I didn't, if a handful of D20 rolls went by and someone didn't feel like they had a lot of agency, it's totally fine. They're going to get plenty of opportunities to make tons of choices. But now in my 40s, my friends, married, kids, whatever, they don't have 12 hours to play a week, we may not have 12 hours to play a month. And so the pressure, the amount that every single player turn, every single player action, every single little moment is carrying a much higher level of burden of weight and importance than it ever has before. And so that's something that I'm very aware of. And it's not just on behalf of my players, it's on behalf of me as the game master as well. So that's one of the reasons why I put so much pressure on that. Twiggy says, I feel like a healthy life cycle of an edition is 3 to 5 years, but you can go even longer if you revise the rules and reinvent some classes with new mechanics with a max of 10 years. Twiggy, I couldn't agree with you more. And I know, the cynic is here, Vin's here, and I think he would agree with me. For me, the best example of this is 3rd edition. 3rd edition came out in 2000, and they did their play testing as best as they could. These teams are always pretty small. Nowadays, we have these huge open beta testing, and I honestly think most of that is garbage and probably worthless, but I digress. 3rd edition came out, and you come out with the core books, you come out with a handful of books, you come out with some soft cover splat books, and by and large, the first 3 years, that's kind of like the open beta. You learn about the game in a more realistic fashion from thousands, if not tens of thousands of people playing the game. You hear the feedback. You listen to what people are saying, what needs tweaked, what needs balance change. You don't change the core system. You don't change the core premise of the game. But 3 years in, circa 2003, you come out with your edition 0.5, your remaster, whatever you want to call it. And you introduce a lot of errata, you introduce a lot of balance changes, and you do it in one go. And it's still very clearly the same core engine of the game. Then you say, from this point on, we are going to make minimal changes, to the game structure. Expect for this game system, this engine, to be around for about another 5 years. And then about 6 years into the whole product life cycle, they start working on the new edition. And maybe like that last year to year and a half of that edition, they say, you know what? Edition's coming to an end. Let's have some fun. Let's not worry about stuff. Let's print your Tome of Battle, Book of Nine Swords. Let's print Mythic Adventures, right? Let's print some of these just crazy ideas. Because, there's not as much to lose, and you get to really have some fun with the edition on your way out, and then everyone gets hype about a new game engine, and maybe you secretly can play test some of your new ideas in some of those older editions, or in some of those weird wonky products. And then after about 8 total years, you put a new edition in people's hands, and it's a legitimately new edition, in the sense where maybe, the games are not compatible. These are different games. And I think that is that to me is the ideal life cycle. Self-confessed and says, shout out to 3E 3.5. Yeah, I just think the way that they did it was really, really well. Now, yes, 3E had way too much splat. It had way too much splat. Just like so much splat. I mean, like I said before, I've shown this before, but like that bottom, this shelf right here is just all official 3E stuff, right? Like first edition, second edition's right here, fourth edition's right here, fifth edition is all the way over here. But this entire bottom shelf is that's just the official 3E books, right? That's just the official 3E books. That's not even the, the third party stuff. It's pretty crazy. So I get it. JP says, big fan of how Nimble has tackled 5e. Really addresses the whole make every turn count stuff. So I've seen a lot of ads for Nimble, but I have not actually checked it out. So I'm kind of curious how that works. Nimble 5e. I didn't realize it was like a... it's on backer kit. Ooh, there we go. Yeah, well, I will say this. I just opened it up, okay? And I just opened it up, and the first thing that came up when that video started playing is, your game nights are too precious to waste. So you know what? I mean, that is actually kind of directly exactly addressing what I was just talking about. So that's actually kind of fortuitous. All right, we'll watch the trailer. Okay, we'll watch the trailer.
Your game nights are too precious to waste with slow, tedious rules. Nimble 5e is a fast, tactical, and 5e compatible RPG
you got to throw that and 5e compatible.
that eliminates the slog, all too common at our game sessions. No more waiting 15 minutes for your turn just to miss your attack. No, not here. Attacks are fast and heroic. No more fiddly back and forth just to see if you even hit. The overhauled combat system keeps things quick yet deeply strategic. And with exploding critical hits, you can retain the chaotic excitement of battle. Tactics and teamwork are greatly improved with new heroic reactions. Actively defend and bravely interpose for your allies. And with instant initiative, you can get right into combat without breaking up the flow of the story. Nimble enables more player agency with a flexible action economy and deep.
Who are these people? I mean, if you've watched my channel for a long time, and JP, I don't know if you have, but if anybody here has watched my, how did no one know? Tell me about this. I mean, a lot of the work. No, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that they deliver on this. I'm just saying that a lot of the words that they are using are things that I frequently discuss and talk about at length. Obviously, I talk about player agency all the time, but I also talk about this idea of I hate initiative. I think it breaks up the flow of game, and I want to be able to just get instantly into combat. I don't want to wait. I love the idea of, I don't know what bravely interpose mean, but if it means what I think it means, if it means taking the 13th age intercept idea, which is the idea of how do we break up this idea of this static fight where the fighter just stands still as the monster walks around him and goes and kills his wizard buddy. But instead, if we introduce this idea, which actually also was from Mordheim, actually, going all the way back to 1999, Mordheim Skirmish Battle had this idea of intercepting. And if it says actively defend, and that means that like the players are rolling defense instead of passive armor class and the GM rolls. I mean, That's a lot to like. All right, let's go back to where we were here.
With a flexible action economy and deep yet simple weapon, skill, and magic systems. A character sheet that looks less like a tax form and less intimidating.
All right, let's take a look here. It looks like a 5e character sheet. We've got a thing of skills, strength, dex. It was a charisma in one box, a big armor rating. So maybe you do have an armor rating. Speed, initiative, exhaustion. All right, so it still definitely is 5e compatible. There's no doubt about that. But again, you know what? You gotta kind of make it 5e compatible if you actually want. I mean, look at this. I mean, they got 4,290 backers. Their goal was 5,000. They made 265. I'm sure they're extremely excited about that. But how much would they have gotten if this wasn't 5e compatible? Probably 10% of that. Oh yeah, no con. I don't know how I missed that. You know why I missed that? Because Dungeon Coach got rid of the con too and just folded it into strength. I don't know if that's what they did here, but I'm okay with that decision. So
It's more focused, reducing bookkeeping and making each remaining option matter far more. There are 11 fresh but familiar new classes that beautifully take advantage of the updated rules, each with its own unique and super flavorful playstyle. New spells that encourage creativity and allow for discovering cool setups and combos that are satisfying to pull off. And items as the GM that you can't wait to hand out. Items that will help move the story forward or get your party into or out of trouble as you see fit. A new legendary monster system that makes them actually easy to run at a glance, balanced even across widely differing party sizes. The tide of battle will shift in interesting ways, making for even more memorable nail-biting moments. The best part, this is all 5e compatible. Bring your favorite D&D adventure modules, your favorite third-party monster.
And I like, by the way, I'm just teasing this person. I don't know who they are. I like how they're like, but the best part. We just talked about all these amazing things that we wanted to put into our game. And they're like, but the best part.
Bring your favorite D&D adventure modules, your favorite third-party monster books.
Is that it's 5e compatible.
Nimble system. Have more fun playing epic stories. With affordable digital and physical softcover options, as well as a premium and beautiful hardcover boxed set complete with a GM screen and dozens of...
Damn, a box set. Holy shit, these people are really speaking my language. Holy crap, this is amazing.
Spell cards for quick...
You know me, I love a box set.
Slay the slog at your game nights. Get more out of your RPG sessions.
Back Nimble today.
Well, it's a little late for that, but you know what? Maybe we can. I don't know. Maybe we can reach out to them. Maybe we can get something right. I mean, that's very interesting. There's a lot saying. There's a lot saying. They're saying a lot of words that I like. JP says there are late pledges. All right. Yeah, but JP, I wanna flex my content creator muscles, and I want it now. Slay the slog. I mean, look, there's marketing. I mean, you can't deny that. I mean, it's definitely it's 5e, there's no doubt about it. But like, if you're gonna play 5e, there seems like that's a lot of the things that I would want to do when I play 5e, which is, again, get rid of a lot of that stuff. Vince, as he is one to do, Vin says, I'm going to buy it and steal any good ideas for house rules. I think someone said up in the chat that it was somebody's house rules, basically, and they just said, oh, we'll just make this into a game. Basically, they did what I did for DTX, except they actually made it into a game, so good on them. Ben, on the other hand, says, I am so looking forward to ending my D&D campaign and not looking back. To be fair, by the way, for those of you at home keeping track, Ben is running a first edition AD&D campaign, not a 5e campaign. But, I mean, look, I will always love the D20. It will always be my first and my true love. And D&D will always speak to me. And there's no way that I will ever get to a place where, that trailer that we just watched isn't like, okay, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of ideas there that I really think is really, really cool. I am a big fan of Sacred Cow Hamburger, and I like killing them if it creates a more compelling and interesting game experience. I'm not interested in that. And I've said this before. I personally, Derek, have moved sort of past the simulationism elements, and I am much more interested in gamist, narrativist mechanics these days. JP, thank you for stopping by. Thanks for it. I mean, you know what? For no other reason, JP, than kind of turning me on to Nimble. I mean, I'm going to take it out. I'm going to check it out. So maybe look forward to that. Thanks, JP. And also off to a Cypher game, which is how we started talking about Numenera. So thanks, JP. Let's see here. I wonder how many of these games are just going to be pilfered for house rules in D&D. John, so many of them. So many of them. So many of them. But look, I mean, that's the way that the industry works, Yeet con into the sun. All it does in 5e is hit points and con saves. Get it out of here. I personally am not a big fan of con because again, I mean, maybe once back in the day where like Constitution was like you had system shock and resurrection % chance survival, but it doesn't do anything now. It's not tied to any skills. No classes use it. I mean, obviously the kineticist uses it now, but it's kind of like that's kind of a backronym in almost case. And it's very difficult, especially in a fantasy context, for me to imagine a high strength, low con character. It just doesn't really seem to happen. And I don't know. I just don't see the need for it anymore. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with, that's how a lot of games are made. People just steal, house rule, and beg, borrow. K-Tube just joined a Nimble play-by-post, and it's great. Boy, play-by-post Nimble. Maybe that's ideal because it's fast and tactical. Would you say that it's tactical cinematic? Tactical cinematic. Let's see what their goals were. 60K gets the Oathbreaker. 80K gets the Spellblade. 100K gets the big legendary cards. 120 got the upgraded Adventure. 140K gets VTT support, likely Foundry. 160K gets a 5-panel thick with 2 C's GM screen, but it's hard to see if it's landscape or not. It looks kind of tall. 180K, the Shadow Reaver. The Shadowmancer Martial class. 200K, updated books with foil stamping and bookmark ribbons. Gotta love that. More cards, 225 upgraded adventure, Beastmaster, and we did not get to 250K, which would have been the online character builder. Yeah, pretty cool. I don't know. I'm interested. I'll check it out. We'll check it out. Anyways, that's cool. Yeah, JP, really great guy. I totally recommend checking out his channel. I think he's truly putting out. I mean, he's doing everything right. He's making short videos, 10 to 15 minutes long. They're very actionable. He's got a great charisma. He's showing you how to do stuff. It's again very, very hands-on, very practical, fun. It's just everything that you need for a good, successful YouTube channel. He's legit. He knows what he's talking about. He means what he's talking about, and it's really great. So he does a bunch of zines as well. Just doing a fantastic job. Steven was like, "Oh my God," he's like, "I got to work with this guy," and then he's like, "Oh, I'm already talking to him," because Steven talks to so many people. It's funny. Eric says, "I started with AD&D and spent the 80s and 90s playing not D&D and came back for 4E and 4E." Yeah, so I kind of started the same way. I started with AD&D first edition, second edition. We played that up and through about the mid 90s, and right after like Skills and Powers came out, we stopped playing AD&D, and that's when I first got into like Earth Dawn, GURPS, the Saga game edition, some of the World of Darkness games. So we played most of the late 90s was playing not D&D. But then we got back into D&D big time with 3E, and that was huge. And we played 3E pretty much nonstop, or 3E variants, until 4E came out. And then we played 4E, and then it was after 4E that I started going to cons and I started playing these weird PBTA games like circa 2009, 2010, and I started getting way more into these narrative indie concepts, and my player base was still pretty firmly rooted in the sort of, D20ism. And then when 4E kind of came to a conclusion and 5E didn't really grab us, there was kind of this weird moment because I had been playing all these really weird games, Monster Hearts and, all this stuff, and I wanted to play them. But my group was like, we kind of want to go back to 3E, but, let's just play Pathfinder instead because that's like the game that's being supported. And we ended up going to Pathfinder for basically a long time. And we played other games in there for sure, but that was like our primary game. And so, yeah, but that was me kind of, struggling with that. Oh, hello, buddy. Who came to join us? Come here. Look who it is. Look who it is. It's the Zeus man. Hi, buddy. How you doing, sir? Hello, buddy. my old man. He's 10. Oh, such a good boy. He just had a surgery a couple weeks ago. Oh, there you go, sir. He's doing good. He's up here begging for something, probably. And that's how Derek actually got subscribed. You know, it reminds me of the one time I had like a maple cam on my thing, and people would just tip for me to turn on the maple cam. Self-confessed in a quick repost. Do you think rolling for damage adds something to the game, despite how much I like DC 20 and not? Hold on a sec. Let me read this again. Quick repost. Do you think rolling for damage adds something to the game, despite how much I like DC 20? And no, not rolling can work, but I think the gambler in me still looks forward to the dice. I mean, here's the problem that I have. You're just cross multiplying variability with variability, right? So now the question of if you do something is in question, and then the question of, and if you did it, how well did you do it is in question. And I find those to be very unsatisfying. I think, like, a great example of a game that I really like is how it does damage is like Legend of the Five Rings. In Legend of the Five Rings, when you attack, the damage that you deal is based off of your weapon. Certain weapons do more damage, certain weapons do less damage. But, you know, it doesn't use a DC 20. It uses, you know, successes on a dice. These are custom dice, right, that have weird symbols on them and stuff. But the more successes you get, the better your hit, okay, and you can deal more damage. So, to me, that's, I think, a lot more compelling. I think that's a lot cooler. Because then it feels like a high hit is also a big hit. You know, I think, you know, obviously Pathfinder 2 has this idea of hitting by more than 10 and getting a critical hit, which feels good, although critical hits can suck sometimes. But like in a standard D20 game where you like roll really well to hit and then end up rolling really poorly on the damage, it just feels like this, why do we need two sources of randomness? You know, and it kind of reminds me that like, you know, there's some games where it's like, how much randomness do we need? Where it's like, you know, Hackmaster was kind of, the original Hackmaster was kind of like making fun of this, right? Because like you would roll a D20 to determine your attack roll. Then they would roll a D20 to determine basically their AC. It was their defense. So you're both rolling D20s. Their defense is random. Your attack bonus is random. Then you would roll your damage, and then they would roll their armor absorption, which was random. So it was just like random, just to make it completely nonsense in a certain way. And I guess at a certain point, Vin, it goes back to way back where we were talking about at the beginning. It becomes Plinko, I think, at a certain point. It looks like there's a lot of decisions, but you're introducing so much randomness into the equation that the choice starts to matter less, and it starts to become more, just a bunch of random nonsense. Let's see here. Jackal says, I like the rolling for damage before the hit idea that you had. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm a bigger fan of setting the stakes. I mean, Jackal, that's really more of a Blades in the Dark type thing where it's like, you're saying, oh, I think I'm stuck. There we go. I was stuck in my chair. Part of those games key is you got to set the stakes and let people know what they're fighting for. And so the way you do this is with the damage roll, especially if players have reactions or things that they can actually do to like absorb and defend against the blows. I think that's what's really, really cool. Yes, it also rewards you for boosting your attack bonus. I do agree that 4E did crit damage right. 4E crit damage, for those of you who didn't know, is maximum. Whatever you could roll maximum, that's how much damage you did. And then as your weapon got bonus, you got like a little bonus on top of it. So a crit was literally max damage plus a little bit of a bonus. And yes, Year Zero does do something very similar as well. I'll harp on Pendragon a bit. Rolling for damage in Pendragon has felt more interesting than any other game I've played, partly because the damage stat is based off of your character. Interesting. Well, I'll say that I really love Legend of the Five Rings damage system because I've said this before, but in Legend of the Five Rings, weapons have two ratings. One is called damage and one is called deadliness. And deadliness is what we would traditionally think of as damage. So a katana has a very high deadliness. A naginata, which is like a katana at the end of a big spear, has a very high deadliness. Damage is more of a representation of how good of a weapon is this really. And that may sound strange, but the idea is that like the humble bow staff, right, has a very low deadliness, but actually has a higher damage than the katana. And the reason is because when push came to shove, if I had to have a 6-foot-long staff that I could use in any millions of different ways with reach and all that, everything else that comes with it, it is in fact a better martial arts weapon than a katana, which is shorter range and has limited utility and has a bunch of other problems with it. Now, no doubt, if I was going to get struck across the chest, I'd rather get struck across the chest with the bow staff than with the katana. I'm not saying that either would feel particularly good, but the katana would probably be a lot worse. And that's where the deadliness factor comes in. But the damage capability shows you how good is this weapon actually at winning a fight, not necessarily killing somebody. So there's kind of an interesting distinction there in that game, which I really, really like. Nimble books are screener A5. Okay, so there you go. It looks like, so while it is portrait, it will not be that tall. It'll be basically half a sheet, right? A5, I think 2A, isn't A5 2, like 8.5 cut down the middle? I think that's A5. So it would be like that tall. So basically landscape. Daggerheart gives you max plus the roll. So D8 plus 2 becomes 8 plus D8 plus 2. We should just revert to Shadowrun first. Rolling. Was Shadowrun the one that had soak? What was the game? Oh, was that Vampire that had soak? What was the game system that had soaking? Right. A staff also has 2 heads. It's twice as versatile. Right. With a bow staff, you could be attacking with this side, but then you could also attack with this side. So again, the idea of Legend of the Five Rings is, you're probably not going to want to, you could easily knock somebody out and beat somebody in combat with a bow staff. You might not cut them open from sternum to pelvis, but it is in some ways a better weapon. And as sort of part of that parcel, something like the Naginata, which is a big staff with a katana at the end of it, not only has the deadliness of the katana, it actually does quote unquote more damage as well. And you might say, so the Naginata is better than the katana? And it's like, yeah, for a lot of instances, it is. And that's because in real war weapons battlefields, weapons like the spear and the bow were, kings of the battlefield for a reason. And some of these other weapons were mostly used ceremonially or as a backup weapon and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of simulationism there, but it does add to like the feeling of the game world, which I really liked. Vampire did have soak. There we go. Genesis has soak. Apparently Savage Worlds has soak, and I don't remember soaking. Earlier Vampire the Masquerade editions has soak. Now there's just superficial damage and aggravated damage. So it's like you have 2 health bars. The katana was not an actual battlefield weapon, as much as I prefer to enjoy them as such. Exactly. In fact, well, I'm not going to get into it, but in Legend of the Five Rings, the katana has a trait which is called razor edged, which makes it very dangerous and deadly. Like you can very easily cut through flesh. But it also means that if your katana basically attacks something that's like heavy and iron and like an armor or something like that, it has actually a chance of chipping and breaking. Like the katana was not a crude weapon for hacking through heavily armored targets on a battlefield. It's not what it was. It was mostly a ceremonial weapon. Vin says, I like max damage a lot, less variable than double or triple, but it still feels good. And that's why I think max damage plus a kicker is like even better. And I think that's also a lot of fun. The other thing that's secret about max damage is, even if it has a kicker, but even if let's assume it doesn't have the kicker, the thing about critical hits is they're very swingy because you could literally do twice as much damage as you normally could do. Whereas with max damage, this is the amount of damage that you could theoretically do on a normal hit anyways. So it can help kind of mitigate some of that variability. Yeah, Scott. When I saw that they said it doesn't, ever since Into the Odd came out, like people have been really hyped up about this whole, don't, damage on no roll to hit. So when he said there's no roll to hit, I assumed it was very much Into the Odd. It's funny too. One of the first videos that we made was called like "Missing is Not Fun," and that like video got like the most like hateful comments at the time that we ever got about this. And they're like, "Oh, you're just one of those whiny new players that complains." I'm like, number one, you have no idea who I am. But it's funny because I wasn't really saying that like I don't want my players to fail. I'm just saying that like missing is not fun. Musashi won duels using a normal 2x4. I love it. And to be fair, a long enough 2x4 in Legend of the Five Rings term would have a high damage, but probably a low deadliness. But then once you've beaten them senseless or rendered them otherwise incapable of fighting, you could kill them with anything, right? Like, I mean, hell, if someone's knocked out, you could kill them with a tin cup, So at that point, you don't need something super dramatic like a katana. Yeah, you want to get hyped up. You want people to roll well, and you want people to have a fun choice. And that's actually another thing that I really like again about Legend of the Five Rings is you roll the dice, and then all the dice have different symbols, but you only get to keep so many of them. You don't get the whole dice pool. You only get to keep some of the dice, and some of the dice have good symbols on them, and some of the dice have bad symbols on them. But I don't think there are any dice that just have bad symbols. So, you might really want to do a lot of damage, but if you want to do a lot of damage, you're going to have to take a lot of these dice that have stress, and strife is called strife, not stress. And so, but that's a decision that you're making. You could choose not to do that. You could choose to do a lesser hit that wouldn't inflict as much strife on your character. And so it's this fun resource, that you can sort of manage throughout the course of the fight. Can we change this into another Legend of Five Ring stream? Please. Well, unfortunately, Ford, no. I thought this was going to be a quick stream, but it's already past 9 o'clock. But we've had a lot of fun, and it was great having some of my good long-term friends and patrons here in the channel. It was great to see Bob and Tim stop by, Ben, Vin, GM Scott, so many of our old school folks here, and of course, so many incredible and amazing patrons. Love to see you all here, and some new folks. And JP Coulford stopped by, which is awesome. He's a really cool guy. Again, there are some influencers and people I've met, at these various conventions and stuff that are, I think they're more business people than they are necessarily, RPGers. But I met a lot of people who are also very passionate about these games, and that's been really, really cool. JP is one of them. Actually, Dungeon Coach was, again, admittedly, he is, pretty naive to some of these other games, but he's very enthusiastic. Professor Dungeon Master is the real deal. He's such a cool guy. So Kelsey, she literally, played with and learned at the heels of some of Gary Gygax's players, so she's got like this old school cred essential. So there are people out there who are really, really legit, and I really appreciate that. Something I always talk about, Glicker. I'm sure you know this. Most of you probably are Roll for Combat subscribers, but Steven's always trying to, get a cool video going, get hundreds of people, thousands of people watching you stream, and rightfully so. It's great marketing, and gets his name out there. And him and Mark have a lot of great takes on things and bring a lot of information. He has a lot of context. But one of the things I respect the most about Steven Glicker is he runs games, and he shows that, and you can watch him live running games, like I think every week, and they don't really get a lot of views on those, but there's something to be said. I mean, it's one of my things where I was like, I want to make sure that people, one of my regrets is that in 2024, we didn't have an actual play. There would have been no way for us to do it. We didn't, our studio, we had to vacate our studio, and then everything this summer had been crazy for me and for my co-hosts. But I want people to be able to be like, hey, look, this guy talks all this shit. Let me watch him run a game. And let me see how he actually, does he put his money where his mouth is? And in some cases you might say no, in some cases you might say, oh wow, yeah, okay, I like the way this guy runs a game. So it's definitely one of my goals is to get more of that going on. And one of the things that I was trying to do before the fire is organize some games for my patrons, but I wanted to potentially record those games with my patrons. And these are my patrons. I would never display that publicly out onto YouTube, but with everybody's permission, I was going to make those videos available to my patrons. So that way my patrons could watch some of these games that I'm running with potentially people who they know from the Patreon and fellow Discord members, and sort of realize, hey, these are just, patrons like me, and they're playing. And so like, it kind of makes you maybe feel a little bit like, oh, that could easily be me. They're not like I'm not saying that like Bob and Smith are like ringers, who are around the back, but like it's sometimes it's nice to see like regular people, even though again, my gaming groups that have been on my channel have always been super regular people, which is part of the reason they were popular. But it's because they're like, oh, these people aren't these people are definitely not paid professional actors. They are actually pretty horrible. But it's real, there's a realness to it. So anyways, I'd love to do that. But also selfishly, that this will be the selfish thing. The final thing I'll say about this summer and the first looks and the cons is I just need to play more games. I sometimes worry that the channel and running the streams and managing the Patreon and thinking about all the mega games that other people are running. Sometimes I'm worried that it can burn me, especially when we had the studio, the work that went into that, the lighting, the sound, the builds, the set. All of that was a shitload of work. But in some ways it feels like it sort of burned me out on the RPG itself. And it's like, and I'm not playing. And so like the one thing that I learned this summer from these conventions and these takeaways is that, I want to rediscover that that drive and that passion to run all these games, and do so with a enthusiastic group of players who really want to try out these games. And there are some games that I unapologetically love, and I would love to get those games played. Avatar Legends being one of them. I would say the two games that I am the most interested in playing right now are probably Avatar Legends, Legend of the Five Rings, and I don't know what the third one is, but there's a third one. I don't know what it is. Not D&D 4. I mean, I'd play D&D 5th edition, but not D&D. I don't know. I want to say Torchbearer, but there's something about that. Maybe it's like the One Ring. Oh, Jackal, you got it. F you. You got it. That's right. That actually slipped my mind. Absolutely. Although I'll be honest with you, Jackal. And I do want to check out this Final Fantasy 14 RPG as well, because I think it sounds like they're really doing some paradigm breaking over there. They're really killing some sacred cows, and I'm all for it. So I really want to see what they do. I will say, Jackal Turnmoons, that if I were to really start playing a lot of Fabula Ultima, I have a sneaking suspicion that I would eventually want to sort of make my own game. Not because I think that game is bad. Far from it. I think it's fantastic and it's amazing and it's epic. But specifically what I want out of a JRPG is like Final Fantasy 1. And I want a system that basically like the roll to hit in combat is not a thing. That's basically what I want. And I get it. It's very integrated into the ecosystem and actually has a lot of benefits because it means that Fabula points let you re-roll and you need to trigger your bonds and, all this other stuff to basically guarantee your hit. And that's all good stuff. Like, it's a very systematic ecosystem. It's all tied together. So it's not something I think that you could just home rule or hack. And it has a good gameplay pattern to it. But for me personally, it's just kind of like, I'd be like, well, it's kind of not from a JRPG perspective. My version of JRPG is a little bit different. Anyways, but yeah, Fabula Ultima is amazing. I love all the books that Emmanuel has come out with. I love his approach, his style to gaming, and boy, it is a really compelling game. A lot of fun narrative elements, my favorite, story beats. I love the narrative Fabula, the points, the Ultima points. these kind of currencies to let you manipulate the game. Just fantastic. So yeah, Fabula Ultima, A+. Running session 0.5/1 of FU with some friends and KOLC patrons tomorrow. Rock on. Awesome. Well, that is very awesome. Cheers. So there you go. The 3 games that I most want to play: Avatar Legends, Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition, Fabula Ultima. Honorable mentions in the second place: Mouse Guard, Torchbearer, maybe another Forge in the Dark game. I've certainly I've run a lot of Blades in the Dark and Scum and Villainy games, but maybe there's another one that I haven't run yet that I'd be like, that something different, change up the math a little bit, from the equation. Not saying that I don't like those games. I do love those games, but just something different to try with the general. And there's some weird, I'm not sure which 2D20 game I'd rather play. Part of me really wants to dive into Star Trek just because I have players who are so passionate about Star Trek. And I personally am way more passionate about Dune. But my players like Kaz and Smith are like super Star Trek nerds. And so like their enthusiasm and the knowledge of that would be like, and their knowledge about Star Trek makes me more inclined to want to run a game of Star Trek than it is. But I haven't really kicked the tires of 2D20 that much, and I'd like to try. So I think I own every single Dune book. So Star Trek not so much. Although the second edition just came out, and I do need to pick that up eventually. So, but those are kind of like where I'm at, like in the games that I've seen and what I'm interested to look at and all this other stuff. So, I'm not saying I'm off Free League. But I played a lot of Free League, and I've experienced the Year Zero engine. It's fun. It's cool. It's good. If 2025 had less Free League, for me personally, I'd be okay with that. I think Dragonbane is a great system, and there's a lot to love about it. I think the roll under, no DC system, the conditions, it's a really great system. And I'm really excited for Dragontide once we launch it, because I think it'll provide a really nice contrast to Pathfinder 2 and to Southern Beaches. I didn't really think about Southern Beaches has been a joke for so long that I didn't really think about the fact that they're both kind of set, in these islands. But there we have it. I guess that's just the name of the game. I guess I really just want to be on a boat. Very excited for Girl by Moonlight. My first play-by-post on the Discord. Awesome. That's fantastic, Naki. I'm glad. I'm really glad that people can play. Ideally, people should play in whatever way they want to play. But some people can't make it into a regular game session 4 hours long, but they can get it into a play-by-post. Some people aren't comfortable playing in a game session with audio and visual, and so they'll play by post. Other people, they want to grind on a VTT for 5 hours, and we have those options too. So I think it's great that we have so many options. James got to play or run. Ooh, great question. Right now, I am not really feeling like a player, if I'm being honest. Now, my initials are DM. I prefer being the game master. Let me be very clear about this. There are very few instances where I would rather be a player, and it has to be the right game system. And I really have to, it would have to be like the one game I would probably be the most interested being a player in would be a Fabula Ultima game. Because it has a nice balance of narrative control that I get as a player. The mechanics are very transparent. We're operating within that fixed system. I think the job abilities, the class abilities are very compelling and very cool. So I think everything I'm talking about is run, but I think play, if I had to pick a game to play, it would be Fabula Ultima. Jackal says, honorable mention, of course, Hackmaster. Of course. Twinkies played Star Trek. It's really good. Yeah, I've read through the first edition. It's fine. Apparently in the second edition, they got rid of effect dice, which is good for me because they got rid of effect dice in Dune, and I thought effect dice were too fiddly and didn't need to be in the game. But I could be wrong. Maybe they're still in the game, but I think they got rid of them, which is good. Boothby has a Dune and a Star Trek adventure, a game going for the community. Boothby, I knew you had the Dune game. Did I not know that you have the Star Trek game? Star Trek, it felt like a Star Trek episode, which is good. I mean, that's what we're playing the game for. Do you think you'll be able to run those for the Friday group, or will you scratch that itch by running Patreon games? Casey, I don't know what's going to happen with our Friday game group. I mean, that has been, unfortunately very inconsistent. I'm just as much to blame as anybody, Casey, for that. Look at me. I'm off to Vegas, right? Friday. We played last Friday. We played Forbidden Lands last Friday. This Friday, are we going to play? No, we can't play it. Why? Derek's not here. He's going to be in Las Vegas. So, and a couple weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, whatever, I was in Gen Con. And a month before that, me, Smith, and Bob were at Origins. So, I'm not saying that I don't miss that as well, but I don't know. My Friday group, I'm much more aware. I want to be much more, apropos to what that group wants. And I'd rather have them all really bought in on a game system rather than being one that I specifically want to run or play. For me, with that group, because they're my friends and, them all being there and them all being there to be excited to be there is more important to me than like my own individual personal taste. So if all of my players were like, including players who maybe, haven't shown up in a couple campaigns or whatever, if they came out of the woodwork, because I was like, hey, everyone's like, we really want to play Pathfinder 2nd edition. We really want to play 3rd edition D&D, and everybody's excited. We're getting the band back together. Everybody's pumped about it. That would excite me the most for that group. For my own personal selfish reasons, those games that I listed would probably be something that I would run on the Patreon. Nakia, sounds like NightCon needs to be on our cruise to get that boat fixed. That's the great debate right now. NightCon, will it be in NightCon? Is it going to be based in the Midwest / Cleveland, Vegas, or on a boat? You can make your own game and put your initials on it. The DM squared RPG. Okay, Star Trek game is just kicking off. Session 0 was just a few weeks ago. Okay, so I'm not like completely out of the water, or I'm not completely off base there, but I knew the Dune game was going on. I just didn't know that you had already started the Star Trek game. That's pretty cool. Sweet. Dungeon Coach is live right now. Yeah, good. Well, if you're done watching me, you should go check him out. A lot of interesting things there. I'm interested to see what comes out of this beta. I think there was a couple of things in that, my quick read through, that kind of struck me as very interesting. But, I could understand, as someone who maybe has had limited experience playing a ton of games, but you've played a lot of 5e and you like a certain type of game, especially a more video game MMO type of game, and you say, these things frustrate me about 5e, I can understand how you could end up with that game and why that game would be very popular. But kind of like it's kind of like the Shadow Dark, but on the other side, right? Shadow Dark is like, oh, you like 5e, but you don't like all the rules, and you kind of just want to get back to just kind of like, but it's still 5e, still advantage, disadvantage, but you just want to get back to like the simple stuff and minimal characters and very, very, very few things going on. That's Shadow Dark. DC-20 feels like the other side of that, right? Where you go, don't you want more resources? Don't you want a more balanced game? Don't you want to have a lot more actions and a lot more reactions and have a lot more interactivity between all these different abilities? Don't you want a bunch of different resources and points and this 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 points? And like I said, I think it's too many points for like a generic all-purpose game, even though it obviously did very well. It's not too many points for me. I like resources. I like pools of resources. I like the tension, the pull. If you watch Quest for the Frozen Flame, you know that part of the reason part of what I did in that game is take from some of my favorite board games that use conflicts between resources and prioritization of resources, and use different tracks to sort of shape and give texture to the decisions that you're making outside of a purely narrative context, and give it a more mechanical weight. Like one of my in Battlestar Galactica board game, for those of you who don't know, Battlestar Galactica is humanity has been wiped out, but now they live in fleets and they're fleeing through space, trying to get to a home, to a new Earth, while evil murder robots chase them. But you have 4 resources in the game. One is called population, which is how many people are in your fleet. One is called fuel, which is what you need to keep your ships going. One is called food, which represents food and water. It's just called food, but it represents your potable supplies of water and your food. And then the 4th is called morale, right? The will of the people to keep going. If any one of these resources gets to 0, then you lose the game. And there's a great card that comes up that's called like water shortage. And the president, one of the players who has the president card, has to make a decision, right? You can either lose morale or you could lose food. And, again, I love mechanics which tell a story. And so the idea there is either you lose food because you decide the people are running out of food, so you decide to dip into your supplies and give them out, but now we have less food and water. Or you tell them to go without, and morale drops. And, of course, in this game, the president might secretly be an evil murder robot, so you're never sure what decision they're making. But I like the tension and the balance between those different resources. And sometimes you might say, hey, look, we did other things in this game. Our morale is really, really high. We can afford to take some hits on our morale. And then somebody else goes, that's just what an evil murder robot Cylon would say, BSG is such a good but brutal game. Very true. I won it for Team Humans at Starbuck. Last action we played on the last possible action. I think the last game I played at Battlestar Galactica was a very long time ago. And I was a Cylon, which means I was the hidden evil murder robot. And apologies if you don't really know the show, but this is one of my favorite board game social dissections games. There is so the ship, it has all, you have the big warship that's defending the human fleet, which are the unarmored, unarmed fleets of the people. And the Cylons, the evil robots, are sending their little ships flying after all the ships to blow them up, to basically wipe out your fleet, to kill all your people, lose a bunch of population, lose the game. And there's a space on the board that you can take an action, which lets you move your friendly ships, so you can try to move them to safety. And it was Tim's turn, Tim Carpenter, and not my turn. And I knew Tim had said he had a card called Executive Order. And it's a card that lets him give up his turn, and instead he can give somebody else 2 turns. Now, this is very powerful, right? Because you're trading 1 action for 2 actions. But of course, in this game, you're never sure if anybody is a robot or not. So I really wanted Tim to play the action on me because I was evil. So I make this like long-winded speech, and there's another one of my buddies there who's like saying like, he's so full of shit. He's lying to you. Was this the only time people were at my house? Yes, George. It was the only time people were at your house. This is correct. This was the game we played in your kitchen, George. And, my buddy Ross is basically saying like, don't listen to him, Tim. And I'm like, playing with Tim. And then I look at Tim. I go, Tim, look, one thing is true here. Okay. You have to make an action. If you do nothing, okay, we are definitely going to lose. So the question isn't whether you're going to do something. You have to do something. And I'm asking you to trust me. And I've given my reasons. Ross has given his reasons. But at the end of the day, Tim, you just need to trust yourself. What do you believe in? And Tim thinks for a moment, and he goes, in moments like these, I've learned to trust my gut. And he goes, I'm going to play my Executive Order card on Derek. And Ross kind of was like, oh, because Ross, I think he knew. And I kind of smile and grin. I'm like, Tim, we've learned a very important lesson today. Never trust your gut. I go, okay, I am going to activate the fleet, and I'm going to move all the civilian ships right into the middle of the enemy fleet and blow them all up immediately. And you guys all completely get wiped out and you lose. And I was like, I was very happy. But it was like this great storytelling moment. And just the look of failure on Tim's face was priceless. As I pointed out to him that his instincts were in fact completely wrong. Anyways, that was a good moment. in my opinion, the best social deduction game of all time. Only because most social deduction games are pointless. This one actually pretty interesting. Shadows over Camelot, also very, very good. I love jumping too early as a Cylon. It's so unforgiving. I know where you're going with this. Yeah, jumping early as a Cylon is another clever tactic because it seems like you're doing it really like, come on, guys, we got to get out of here. It's really dangerous. We got to jump now. We got to jump now. We don't have time. So playing as a Cylon is really fun. I could talk a lot about that game and about why it's a really great board game, including the expansion, which introduces treachery and reckless skill checks, which are like some of my favorite mechanics in the entire game. And whatever. I don't really like the actual part where you have to go land on New Caprica, but the mechanics, the subsystems that they added to that game in the Pegasus expansion, very good. Yeah, I mean that's the classic game. It's the game where Ross messed up the deck and nobody was a Cylon, but we still lost the game. So, never going against the DM when the death is on the line. Very true. The rare third favorite blunder. My friends and I hate Battlestar Galactica because we hate having to hide something for that long. But I like the game, I think. Shadows over Camelot is especially good when you accidentally shuffle all the roll cards and don't know for sure. Well, no, GM Scott. That's the way the game is supposed to work. Shadows over Camelot plays up to 7 players. There are 8 loyalty cards. 7 of them say you are loyal, and 1 says you are the traitor. In any number of games, whether you're playing with 3 people or 5 people or 7 people, you take all 8 cards, shuffle, 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 and then everybody gets 1 card. Now, when you're only playing with 3 players, you're only handling out 3 of the 8. So there's actually a really good chance that none of the players are a traitor. It could be, but there's 8 cards. You got 3 of them, and only 1 of them says traitor. On the other hand, when you play a 7-player game, there is a chance, small, but there is a chance, there is a world where the 1 card that was left over says traitor. But in a 7-player game, you're much more likely to have a traitor, but you don't know for sure. And that's what makes that game so great. Because in Battlestar Galactica, you know that somebody's a Cylon. That's the way the game rules are set up. But in Shadows over Camelot, you never know. And in 7, it's like you're pretty sure that there's 1. But like when you play Shadows over Camelot with like 3 people or 4 people or 5 people, it is chef's kiss. Because you're like, yeah, there's a good chance that somebody's a traitor, but maybe not. Like it's like 50-50. I really got to pay attention. And then that game's brutally punishing if you misidentify someone as a traitor, because it flips white swords to black. It's the whole thing. Anyways, love that game. Fantastic game. Self-confessed says, I liked Avalon, etc. because they're short. Yeah, Coup, Avalon, those games are okay. They're not great because there's no game. The game is just social deduction. That's what I don't like about Avalon and Werewolf and all those games. There's no game. The only game is what did people vote? And that's what I don't like about those games. I like Battlestar Galactica and Shadows over Camelot are actually a lot more like that game that became really popular over pandemic that, of course, I didn't play because it was a video game, Among Us, because you are supposed to be doing missions. You are ostensibly supposed to be helping the ship to fix these problems. So when you see somebody who doesn't seem to like they're really helping anybody, then that makes you naturally suspicious about them. And so that's part of the fun of these games. I despise Werewolf. I think it's the worst game that has ever been made. I think it's pointless, stupid, tedious, dumb. It has early elimination. People have to wait around. It's boring. Once you're out, you're not allowed to talk. You're not, it's everything about that game. There's no point to it. The first round of Werewolf is just always the most bullshit thing. We kill him. He's got a red shirt. It's like, it's stupid. It's dumb. And I hate it. I think it's one of the dumbest games of all time. Pure social deduction games, I think, are absolutely, completely ridiculous. You're not alone. I hate all social deduction games like that. Yes. No, listen, you can totally enjoy it. It's fine, but I mean, maybe, but also I could just not play a social deduction game or play a game like Shadows over Camelot or Battlestar Galactica, which has the social deduction element added as an addendum to an already existing game structure, which is what I really like. That's where I actually prefer it. That's where I think it's great. Is there another game I like that does that? I don't know, but it's fantastic. All right, enough going off about that. I am off to Vegas. Thank you everybody for coming out tonight and throwing some love and support my way. We love to see it. Zeus loves to see it. Shout out to self-confessed cynic Mr. Benisaro, Whipplestein, Dr. Metropolis, John Bonanza, and Mebaman for the tips and super chats. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out and hanging out with me for a couple hours. I started this stream very tired, and I'm the complete opposite. Talking about RPGs, talking with you all, I'm actually more energized than I was at the beginning of the stream. I always get really hyped. Your enthusiasm feeds my enthusiasm. These games are great, and I just want to play more of them. I want to play more games. I want to do NightCon. I want to get a chance to hang out with so many of you and play games with you and just be part of making these, fun, amazing stories that we can all just tell for years and years to come. And I, start being part of these mega games like Southern Beaches and Dragon Tide, I think are awesome just because it feels like, I'm conducting this great orchestra, this great symphony, and they're making beautiful music. It's like I'm Eru Iluvatar, and I have only put a theme into your mind as one of the Ionidule, and it is up to you to make the music of the Einer. So, and occasionally we get a Melkor. There's occasionally a discordant theme, but for the most part, you all are thinking, and then once the theme is created, you go, some of you have deigned to go down into Arda and act as my will. And with the Silmarillion beast, that's probably which Einer makes circuses. That might be my favorite. That's the most nerdy inside joke statement that has ever been made on this entire stream, this entire channel ever. Probably Aule, right? The Smith, or maybe Yavanna. Ooh, it could be Yavanna. So it's either Aule or Yavanna would be what I would say. But anyways, but yeah, Nakia, that's just how we roll. We end with really obscure Silmarillion references because, why not? That is another game that I want to try out. I need to finish reading it. I really want to read and play, I think, the One Ring second edition. That is a Free League game, I guess, but they took it from Cubicle 7, so it's not really their game. I don't know how much they changed it. I didn't read Cubicle 7's, what was it called? Whatever it was called when it was Cubicle 7. Was it just called The One Ring? Yeah, it was called The One Ring's, like, Adventures Over the Edge of the Wild or something. I never played that. I never picked it up. I never saw it. And I have the second edition. I've only started to flip through it, and I do definitely want to dive into it because the first edition's Adventures in Middle-earth I thought was really compelling, which was for 5e. So I'm curious to see how those mechanics translate into whatever the One Ring game is. So anyways, because I've mostly been on a Tolkien kick lately, again, I actually have been rereading whatever Baron and Luthien's in. And I think it's just called Baron and Luthien. Why did I think it was called something else, like Lost Tales or something? Anyways, but so I've just been sort of enjoying my Tolkien. Night all, enjoy Vegas. I will, Casey. Thank you. No problem, Pathfinder. Well, thank you for being part of this community. I'm glad you joined us, and I'm looking forward to seeing you around. Hopefully you get to enjoy some games and get to play or run, even better. You found your tribe. Yes, indeed. Tor second edition is slightly different than first edition. Hopefully better. Jeff Scott
got tipped $15. If you get to Planet Hollywood or the Venetian, buy a drink from the tipsy robot.
All right. We usually hit up the Venetian or thereabouts. We usually go over to the Venetian, Win, Encore. The tipsy robot. I don't know what that is. I'll have to check it out. Okay, maybe it isn't Lost. Yeah, I think I'm reading Lost Tales. That's what I thought. I have to check. It's on my e-reader. don't think I probably own that one. I'm not sure. Any shows, just food or gambling? Food and gambling, I think is what we're at. Food, gambling, and it's gonna be like 100 degrees, so I'll probably do a pool day as well. We're staying at the Cosmopolitan, which I've never stayed at before, so I'm interested to check out, see what their pool situation is, having never been there. So it's gonna be like 100 degrees, but it's the dry desert heat. But poolside in the shade, it could be pretty nice. So I'm looking forward to that. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Woodland Fellowship. Free League streamlined and improved the Cubicle 7 version. Both Cubicle 7 and Free League made 5e compatible and custom dice versions. Gotcha. Cool. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining me, and maybe there might be a surprise stream from Vegas. So, just keep your ear to the ground, and of course, if you're a patron, you'll get the heads up in KLC content chat or something like that. I think Sauron. I like Sauron. Oh, I'm sorry. I like Sauron, and one of the reasons why I kind of love like some of the stuff from the Second Age is I love Sauron as like a deceiver. I love him as Anatar. I love him as the Lord of of Mordor. I love him as the necromancer of Dol Guldur. When he is this sort of disembodied force / basically bound to Barad-dûr and not really super present. I understand what Tolkien was going for, but I think Sauron is a very cool character, and I love the idea of him. I love the idea in my mind of like Melkor is very chaotic evil, but Sauron is very lawful evil. So anyways, and yes, oh God, the Rings of Power. I've not seen anything from it. All I've ever heard from it is the constant hate and shitting on it. Here's how I know I'm never going to watch this show. Because Smith watches it, because Smith watches most things. But he just shits on it and says it's stupid. Bob watched it and was like, it's kind of cool. And I'm like, that's everything I need to know. That's everything I need to know. Galadriel ran up somebody's sword, that kind of stuff. It's like, I'm just not going to watch it, Yeah, I'm not. I have no need to watch it. That being said, there's like this anime coming out of like the Rohirrim, and they're doing like some sort of find the golem movie or something. How much more can we wring? You know what I learned the other day? Did you know that Peter Jackson is a billionaire? He is the third wealthiest director in the world. Number 1, George Lucas. Number 2, Steven Spielberg. Number 3, Peter fucking Jackson. It's crazy. Where did all the money come from? I don't get it. He looks like a hobo. Anyways, I don't know. Maybe he made some sick, crazy deal or something with the Weta, or maybe he secretly owns New Zealand or something. I don't know. I mean, Lord of the Rings is good. It's amazing. Is it billions of dollars amazing for one guy? I don't know. That seems crazy. Interesting. I mean, again, I don't know where all of his money. Yeah, I mean, some 2000s DVD back end. It's just crazy to me how much money he has, because he has more money than Taylor Swift. It's crazy. He has like more money than Rihanna or something. It's wild how much money he has. I was like blown away. It's kind of like whenever I read like how like much money not Ryan Gosling, the other Ryan Reynolds has, just like between his taking what money he had, investing in buying up Mint Mobile and Aviator Gin and buying a football club in the UK. Like, dude has just like unbelievable amounts of money. And like, apparently, like when he made Deadpool and the Wolverine, he's like, I'm just going to make the movie whatever I want. It doesn't matter. Like, if I need to, I'll just finance it myself. Like, that's pretty baller. All right. Well, apparently, like, basically Peter Jackson's a tech bro. All right. Good for him. Anyways, that was shocking to me. You know what, Peter Jackson? Remake The Hobbit then and make him better. And just don't do what you did. Just do it better. Martin Freeman was good. I liked the guy who played Thorin. And we can stop there. That's basically about it. Those movies were so bad. Yeah. #be better. And on that note, we will let you be better. We'll let you all get back to what you're doing. And again, no stream on Thursday. We may hop on for a quick, fun little live stream Friday night or something Saturday night. So just keep your ears and your eyes open and your heart open. Hopefully you all have a fun time. You get to play some RPGs with your friends, and we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Good night, everybody. Peace out.